20-second warning, 20-second warning. All right, we'll call this general committee meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here this evening. We start our meeting with the following land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are in the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. We'll now take 30 seconds to reflect. Please stand for the singing of the national anthem. And the Council for the City of Peterborough recognizes the principles contained in our Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All right, adoption of minutes, September 2nd, 2025, moved by Councillor Vasiliadis. Any comments or questions, errors or omissions? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. Councillor Purnell's a yay. Mayor Leal's a yay. And that is carried. Mr. Clerk, any disclosure of pecuniary interest this evening?
Mr. Chair, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clerk, I didn't keep a copy of the notice number. Unfortunately, it's on, it was enclosed.
I believe it's 1G. 1G.
Yes, it's 1G. That's acceptable enough? I didn't. Okay. Yes, I'm going to declare interest because the proponent is a client of mine.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hickey. We have 6 reports coming out of closed session this evening. 6. The first one, update that Council approved the recommendation outlined in report LSOCS 25-016 dated August 6, 2025 of the Commissioner Legislative Services as follows. That closed session report LSOCS 25-016 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner Legislative Services respecting a presentation by the Chair of the Board of City of Peterborough Holdings Inc. be received for information. Moved by Mayor Leal. Any comments or questions? All right, we'll take a vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Second item out of closed, surplus lands, that council approve the recommendations outlined in report LSRS 25-013 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner of Legislative Services as follows. A, that the property known municipally as 705 Sherbrooke Street be declared surplus. B, that the notice requirements of bylaw 95/62 be waived. C, that staff be directed to proceed as outlined in the closed session report LSRS 25-013 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner Legislative Services. Moved by Councillor Burke. Any comments or questions? Councillor Burke?
Thank you, Chair Beamer. Through you, I have a deferral I'd like to move. I've submitted the deferral to the clerks in writing. I'll read it first and then speak to it if that's okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Be it resolved that the decision regarding the disposition of 705 Sherbrooke Street Be resolved that the decision regarding the disposition of 705 Sherbrooke Street be deferred and that staff be directed to explore potential opportunities for the use of the property in collaboration with local supportive housing providers, including but not limited to CMHA, Forecast, and other relevant partners, and that a report back to council with the and report back to council with findings and recommendations. Councillor Riel and I have had some good meetings with some local supportive housing agencies locally. We believe that there's opportunity for collaboration. There's housing dollars that could meet a need that we have for supportive housing in the community. I understand that this report has been circulated internally with our staff, but all that the deferral is asking is that Commissioner Laidman and others circulate this and connect with the agencies as well as CMHA. We have hard hub funding that's coming to the city that doesn't allow for capital projects, but it does allow for retrofits of existing buildings. And so for those reasons, I think it would be important for us to sort of connect with those agencies and see if this property could be part of that plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. So a deferral's always always in order. So any comments or questions to the deferral? Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Laidman. As part of the deferral, Commissioner, there was no mention of time to bring such a report to council. Could you give us a little information about how long you see that report coming to council?
Through you, Chair Beamer, I believe this would be under legislative services probably to bring it back. However, I understand that my department would be heavily involved. So I would anticipate, because the budget is November and there's only one council meeting in December, it may be the new year prior to us making sure we get in contact with all the agencies, but earliest it would be the December cycle, I would expect.
Thank you for that. And then a second question, Mr. Chair, through you to either Mr. Freeman or Mr. Laidman. Deferring such a property, is it likely to result, because of the time of year, perhaps a reduction in sale price versus taking it to market now? I know that's probably not the most area of expertise, but just a thought. I've always felt that disposing of a property when the weather's nice is a lot easier than disposing of a property in December, January, February, when people would rather be at home with their feet up rather than trudging through the elements.
Anyone want to take a stab at that or just leave it as a fair point?
Here at the fair point.
Okay.
I don't need an answer.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Deferral, Councillor Riel.
Through the chair, I will support the deferral on a couple of issues. Certainly as the chair of Peterborough Housing Corp, we were selling off stock of Peterborough Housing Corp. And when I became the chair, and certainly when we had the new CEO, we stopped it. We said, we're in the housing business and we have a crisis on our hands. We have 1,400 people on our list. So when Councillor Burke and I had a meeting last week with some of the agencies, they told us about twofold. None, they can't find housing for their clients. Number two, their staff, who are well paid, cannot afford an apartment or a house in the city of Peterborough. And these people are well paid. So here is, we're going to sell off a house. to a developer that is going to charge market rent. So I think it behooves us to do this tonight. We're on this deferral here to see if there's any of the agencies, and some of them, they said they have money, buy stock for their clients, but not only that, but maybe the people that work there that can't afford the market rent that's being charged in the city of Peterborough for an apartment or even house.
Thank you very much, Councillor Real. Councillor Duguay?
Thank you, Chair Beamer. I suppose a question to Commissioner Potts. In the event none of our supportive housing providers are interested in a property, I assume we thus could make the property available through open market?
Mr. Chair, of course, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duguay. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Burke, a deferral. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Next item out of closed litigation that council approved the recommendation outline in report LSOCS 25-015 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner City Solicitor as follows. That staff be directed to proceed as outlined in closed session report LSOCS 25-015 dated October 6, 2025 of the City Solicitor respecting Superior Court litigation. Moved by Councillor Hickey. Any comments or questions? We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Fourth item, litigation that council approved the recommendation outlined in report LSOCS 25-014 dated October 6, 2025 of the City Solicitor as follows. That staff be directed to proceed as outlined in closed session report LSOCS 25-014 dated October 6, 2025 of the City Solicitor respecting confirmed administrative order litigation. Moved by Councillor Baldwin. Any comments or questions? We'll take a vote. That is carried. Our next item is the item Councillor Hickey will declare pecuniary interest on. Lease that council approved the recommendations outlined in report MOAIR 25-008 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner of Municipal Operations as follows. A, that respecting a new lease at Peterborough Regional Airport, staff be authorized as outlined in closed session report MOAIR 25-008 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner of Municipal Operations. B, that respecting termination of a lease at Peterborough Regional Airport, staff be authorized as outlined in report closed session report MOAIR 25-008 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner of Municipal Operations. C, that respecting demolition of a city-owned building at the Peterborough Regional Airport, staff be authorized as outlined in closed session report MOAIR 25-008 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner of Municipal Operations. D, that respecting lease of approval capital budget for the airport, staff be authorized as outlined in closed session report MOAIR 25-008 dated October 6, 2025 of the Commissioner of Municipal Operations. And E, that respecting a non-standard procurements for services at Peterborough Regional Airport, staff be authorized as outlined in closed session report MOAIR 25-008 of the Commissioner of Municipal Operations. Moved by Councillor Duguay. Any comments or questions? All right, we'll take a vote. And that is carried, and we'll note that Councillor Hickey did not vote or participate in that discussion. Final item, labor relations, that council approved the recommendation outlined in report CAO PC 25-002 dated October 6, 2025 of the Director of People and Culture as follows. That closed session report CAO PC 25-002 dated October 6, 2025 of the Director, People and Culture be received for information. Moved by Councillor Duguay. Any comments or questions? We'll take a vote. And that is carried. All right, we'll move to our consent agenda. Committee members, let me know if you'd like to speak to any of the following. 13A, 2025 audit plan. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Seeing none. 13B, City of Peterborough Holdings, Inc., 2024 annual report. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Seeing none. 13C, Heatherton Drive parking restrictions. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Reel. 13D, proposed partial demolition of 107 Park Street North. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Reel. 13E, municipal addressing bylaw update. Anyone wishing to speak to that? Councillor Burke. So up for consent this evening, 13A, 13B, moved by Councillor Vassiliadis. We'll take a vote. Councillor Hakey, we're just waiting for your vote. It's okay. That's okay, and that is carried. Thanks, everyone. All right, we have one presentation this evening, Drinking Water Standard of Care Training. Tricia, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. No, we'll just click it on for you. There you are. Thank you.
You all for letting me be here tonight. This is my first presentation to council, so please forgive me if I'm making mistakes, but I'm used to doing presentations under the PUC, so I see a lot of friendly faces here, and that's really nice to see everybody. So what my presentation is sort of a transition from the PUC reports that you would have seen if you were on the Peterborough Utilities Commission towards now what the reports and your liabilities and sort of things you need to be thinking about as councillors now that the water service has moved under the City of Peterborough.
Maybe I'll just have the microphone a little closer just so people at home can hear you as well.
Closer.
Yeah.
Is that better? Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm going to be brief. My presentation isn't terribly long, but I've left some time for questions at the end, which I'm happy to field at any time. I didn't do any introduction in my slide because I was trying to cut the time, but so I'll do a really quick one. So it's Patricia Scoplianos. I'm here on behalf of the water services. My sort of portfolio over at the water services is the drinking water quality program, compliance, and regulatory issues that come up under the drinking water. So welcome to water. So as of April 1st, water is now part of the PUC, or from the PUC is now part of the city. So some of the things that you might not be aware of is the water services. The commission was originally created in 1902. So to say we have an older water system in terms of heritage and legacy, we do, not necessarily in terms of infrastructure. I don't want to leave that out there. The PUC was created in 1914, but then it became a municipal services board in 2000 with the deamalgamation of electric. We transferred to the city in 2025. So the Peterborough system, the municipal system, it treats water, it tests water, and it distributes drinking water to the residents and the businesses of the city of Peterborough. And what we normally say when we're talking about drinking water, there is like a zero return policy when you have drinking water. When it leaves our plant and when it goes into our customers and the residents of Peterborough, we need to make sure that that drinking water is of exceptional value. And that is what this water services department does. So under the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, it's considered to be a large municipal system. That means it has more than 10,000 connections. So we're very large, and it's not even as large as some of the other systems, but their designations are large and small, and the threshold is 10,000. So there's three main divisions within the water. There's water treatment, water distribution, and water engineering. These staff with the transition is the same staff that has been doing it for years, same competent staff. We still cover the exact same things that we do when we prior under the PUC. This is the important part for you guys. So under legislation, there are many under the Safe Drinking Water Act. There are 5 to 6 really key regulations that we are governed by. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, we have quality standards that cover operational testing and regulations. There's also the regulation under financial plans, asset management planning, which we have now incorporated into the City of Peterborough's systems. Ontario Water Resource Act, which sort of governs how much water we can take from the autonomy and how long we can take it for. There's also other regulations that are smaller of nature, which talk about charges for industrial and commercial users. Part of this drinking water framework came because of Walkerton, which is something that happened in the early 2000s, and we speak about a lot because it was the reason why we have such stringent drinking water quality controls right now. That was why everything changed after that. So the Walkerton inquiry really included a lot of different ways on how they're managing the drinking water system, specifically source to tap. That's the key phrase that they're always talking about. So, and it also includes legislative standard of care. And that's why I'm here, because I just kind of want to make sure that everybody here is aware of that legislative sort of keyhold and requirement under councillors. So Section 11 of the Safe Drinking Water Act talks about recognizing your duty. So as the owner, which you all are considered to be owners of the drinking water system, you have responsibilities within the management of that system. You want to ensure that the water quality meets certain standards, proper system operation, proper system maintenance, monitoring and testing, reporting requirements, and maintaining proper licenses. Now, all of you here are going, I have no idea how any of that is done at the drinking water system. And that's fine. You have the reason, you have staff and you have competent management that does all of that for you. And as a council, you will be receiving reports throughout the year that will build up that confidence for you on what we're doing. So you will be getting reports, and that help you facilitate your standard of care, which is why we're here. We want you to be comfortable with the decisions that you're making on the drinking water system. Another section, 19, also talks the establishing the standard of care for individuals of owners of the municipal drinking water. So this does apply to owners and members of council. You want to exercise the level and care and diligence and skill in respect of a municipal drinking water system that a reasonably prudent person would do. So you don't have to be an expert in drinking water, but you have to be methodical in your care of the drinking water system. You have to act honestly, competently, and with an integrity to maintain that drinking water system, knowing in the back of your mind that that drinking water is for the citizens of Peterborough, who very well are our families, our friends, and also our businesses. So that's kind of the keys of the standard of care. So there are resources to help you with that. So all of you received in your initial package the Councillor's Handbook, which is probably 26 pages of exceptional reading on the Peterborough drinking water system. It tells you everything. So I think it's a great resource if you're getting calls from your constituents and they're asking you about taste and odor. You can actually, there's a section in there on taste and odor if you want to buff up your knowledge. Another great thing to do is just to use us water staff as your resource to say, hey, I have this customer, this is the concerns they're having. What information do I need to know for that? Another great resource is on the ontario.ca website. There actually is a larger, more comprehensive book on the Drinking Water Councillor's Municipal Handbook. I think it's 120 pages. So if you're looking for more, there is still more in there. And on top of that, there is the Walkerton Clean Water Center. They have an online course that you can do on your own, at your own speed, and it will give you a lot more information. They talk a lot about Flint, Michigan recently. They'll talk about the Walkerton. So they kind of lead you through when the system's failed and what happens, so that when you're as a councillor, what you can be looking out for, the questions you need to be asking. So there's a lot of resources out there. As well, I would say to anybody, if you want a treatment plant tour, just reach out to us. We're happy. We love to show off that water treatment plant. If you want to get a really great knowledge base, come on out. Just call us. We'll run you through the plant, and you'll have a great information session with the staff that's up there. This is a really big sheet on standard of care. So these are the kind of questions that you want to be asking yourself. Are you informed? Do you have questions? Do you know who to ask those questions to? And you don't have to be an expert, which is a very key phrase. You just need to know who to ask for those. So you don't need to be an engineer, but you need to know, can I ask an engineer when you're looking at reports that are talking about the water structure and how we're trying to maintain it? Just act honestly and competently and be vigilant. Complacency is the key where we're trying to avoid where it's always going to run. You got to make sure that you're thinking and asking those questions. How long is the system going to run the way it is? We generally will tell you because we're really good at knowing how our assets and our infrastructure works. But it's critical that you never take drinking water safety for granted. That's just sort of our way of doing things. Just having a great oversight. And I'm going to cough here in a minute because I've got a terrible cold. Thank you. That would be great. Oh my gosh, I'm only on 3. So this is one that, sorry, I'm going to pause again because I'm going to cough. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So according to sections of the Safe Drinking Water Act, there are personal fines that can be allocated. I'm just going to wait for the water. It's fantastic water. I would drink it all day. It's tested to, yes, thank you. Sorry. And I did that intentionally to leave the liability slide up there the longest in my head. So thank you. So Drinking Water Act does actually allow for personal liability. So you can see the fines up there that I wouldn't want to fine that large. And there are corporate fines. How to avoid those fines? We give you information to keep you guys in the know of what's going on with the drinking water system. These are the reports that you are going to get annually. There's a drinking water summary report. This one I find counselors are most interested in. No, it's the next one. Sorry. This one tells you brief descriptions of the system, all the test results that we've done, corrective action, and any major expenses. Those are on our website, and they are for probably the last 5 years if you're interested. The summary report actually looks at what we use and how much percentage of that, like where are we on what the plant's capacity is versus what we're actually using. This is the one I find counselors are most interested in because it talks about systems capacities. So when you're talking about building out your system, do we have capacity for more housing, for more industry? The answer is always yes, we do. We have lots of capacity. So that's just a quick. You also get Ministry of Inspection reports. So every year the ministry comes in, they look at the system from a compliance point of view. They look to see, do we meet all of the regulations with respect to drinking water quality standards? And do they have any recommendations? It is worth noting that Peterborough has received 100% inspection ratings for years. We do a very great job up at that water plant and in our distribution system of maintaining our regulatory limits and going even better than what they are. You also received a report today on the management review. I think it was part of the package. So this is something that you'll get more often in the first quarter of a year, but just this was a weird year, so you're getting it quite late. So this system shows the counselors the effectiveness of the quality management system that is in place at the drinking water. You're going to see effectiveness, you're going to see corrective actions, you're going to see a description of what we're doing to keep the process of providing water moving forward. And I think I'm up to questions now because I don't think I can talk anymore.
No, that's fair. Thank you for that presentation and all your hard work. So do have a list of questions. I have Councillor Burke, Vasiliadis, Reel, Crowley, and Duguay. So Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Beamer, and through you to Miss Skopilianos.
Very good.
Patricia, thank you so much. I'll start by just saying you answered a lot of my questions in the slides, which is really helpful. So I appreciate that. The first question I have is about what is there like an emergency plan to be in contact with council if something does happen where we're needed immediately?
What if I'm sorry, through you, whether you're needed immediately? Absolutely.
Certainly.
That would be through the communications department, and that would, yes, that's part of the owner notification. So if, for example, we had an adverse drinking water result that you needed to know, there was I hate to say it, but a boil water advisory, we don't like talk. Absolutely, those information and that contact would be made immediately.
Awesome, thank you. And through the chair, interesting reading, and I think I'm using the term right, that most of the water that we take is from open source, from the autonomy. My question is, what are the biggest major risks for contamination, environmental or otherwise, that we should be concerned about? I've heard that farmland runoff is a big one.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to answer that to the best of my ability, but the folks at the water treatment plant could give you the greatest in-depth answer if you want it. But generally, you're right. It is the runoff from industry, which there aren't any in that great source water area. But also you're looking at agricultural, like ducks and geese and things like that. So that sort of infiltration that's coming, natural part of an ecosystem. Those seem to be our highest sort of issues that become difficult to treat the water. It just becomes a different process.
Thank you. And, a lot of my questions that you answered were about our personal liability. It's a big one considering our pay. $20,000 a day in jail time. Like, I don't think any of us wants to be looking at that at all. And, there's a page 46 of the report looks at our role, the council's role. And you answered for me like a little bit of how we stay on top of that, which is good. If there's a situation where we're given sort of misinformation or stuff is happening that differs from the reports that we're getting, does that shelter us from that liability?
That would have to be a legal question. I honestly couldn't answer that in respect to a legal issue, whether that would cover you.
Yeah, thank you. Because I think your answer was like, as long as we have a general understanding of how the system works, as long as we're answering informed questions when the time comes,
yes,
then that is considered to be in good faith.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, the training, I understand that this report being received for information is considered the training session. At least that's what I think it says in our staff report.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any plans to have additional? I was talking to a few of the counselors with similar concerns, and we were discussing the idea of having like a day-long training session, maybe on site with all of us. Those have been really productive in the past when we've had to do that. Is that something that we can expect?
I am happy to facilitate that.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Burke. Councillor Vasiliadis.
Through your chair to Mrs. Koplanos. I've been on the PUC commission for a few years, and this is always one of the most popular questions, but it's in the actual report. But I just think it's worth saying again. But how many times do we do quality tests or water quality tests per year?
Perfect. Every year we do over 20,000 distinct tests on the drinking water. That's anywhere great. From chlorine to fluoride to bacteriological tests.
That's great. And I know our position is all about asking questions and making sure that we do that. Now, is our system automated in any way? Is it yeah, it is, right?
Yeah, the water treatment plant is.
For sure. And so I remember bringing this up a few years ago, but I know it's changed probably over the years. But are we worried about cyber attacks and concerns about that? And how do we deal with that right now or protect our system?
I think we're always worried about it, but the water treatment plant is what they consider an island.
Okay.
It's not connected.
So it's not connected to
any
anything.
Of those automated systems that we're talking about. They're not connected to our regular network.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. See, now I know that. That's great. And so in the report, it talks about adverse water quality incidents. It talked about November 20th, 2024 on Duffus Street. That happened. And so if there is an adverse water quality incident, that would be reported. We'd be very transparent about it. And then we'd also say how we would resolve the incident. Is that how it generally works?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vasiliadis, for that. Councillor Reel, Duguay, and Mayor Leo. Councillor Reel.
Through the chair, I don't think my question's for the presenter. It's more for the commissioner. I don't find this adequate training. I think Councillor Burke hit the nail on the head that this should be either a half day or a whole day training with us going to the sites. And I say this, and when I said on the Kofi board and each councillor, every one of you are responsible for the water in the city of Peterborough. And that slide up there, when it showed the fines and the jail time, you better heed that. Because I made that quite clear at Kofi, only 2 people sitting on Kofi, and that was the 2 people from council that are responsible for water and not the Kofi board. So I feel this is inadequate training to hand a book and have a presentation. This should be done either a half day or a day, and us actually going to the sites and seeing what we're responsible for. That's the criticism I have. I'm sorry. No criticism of you and the presentation, but this is not training as far as I'm concerned.
So Councillor, maybe we'll get that to discussion. Right now we're in questions, but I'll come right to you and I'm sure the commissioner has an answer to that. So just stay tuned and we'll bring that up during discussion. Questions of the presenter? I have Councillor DeGay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. Patricia, you referenced during your presentation the relationship, the source, that is the Otonabee River. Could you briefly explain the relationship between our water division and that of the Otonabee Region Conservation Authority, which does administer the source water protection? I serve as the vice chairman, and I know we have our meetings, so we're also considering sources that might be contributed to issues vis-a-vis the supply of our source of water. Could you just briefly explain the relationship between what you do and that legislation? Thank you.
So my understanding of that relationship is that we have a relationship with the regional authority, and they administer the source water protection area for us. They design the plans. They tell us what our intake protection zones are and what risks we need to mitigate in those areas. And those are all under the Otonabee Region's conservation. They're all on their website. So you're going to see things like waterfowl management. You're going to see car spilling. You're going to see things like salt road management, those things. So those are all in those risk management plans that have been, the legislation allows you to have the current region area like Orca to do it for us.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just supplementary, if it was the wish or prerogative of council to consider some additional training, I might recommend as part of that training that we ensure the Conservation Authority attends to speak to the Source Water Protection Act, because there is an interrelationship. And Councillor Ciliatis, Councillor Baldwin, and I, we serve on that. So we actually have a double liability, that as a city council, but also on behalf of council vis-a-vis the Conservation Authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor DeGay. Mary Lil, questions?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And Patricia, thank you very much. And the 5 of us that used to sit on the PUC, we always found your reports invaluable when you would come in front of us with a report on the pristine quality of drinking water in the city of Peterborough. This may seem a bit of an odd question of all the material presented, but I've always been very interested in the impact of zebra mussels and other mollusks on our water system, and broadly speaking, other water systems.
Perfect. Thank you. I can answer that. So currently, back when the zebra mussels started to infiltrate the Otonabee, that was in the early 90s. The effect on our drinking water was it cleaned it. It made it clearer. So that sounds really great. But then what happens is now the sunlight can penetrate deeper into the water, and it causes more issues with turbidity and more organics in the water. So what they did was they started a pre-chlorination process at the intake, just a tiny little bit of chlorine, and then the zebra mussels don't like our intake zone. So, but recently it has fallen off in terms of the number of zebra mussels has fallen off, but the raw water is now the same as it was when they were larger. So it does create an issue in terms of turbidity and algae in the water, but all of that has been sort of managed through treatment processes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Patricia, do we still continue with the advocacy programs about boaters and ballast and flushing ballast back into the water to curtail any zebra mussel spread?
I couldn't speak to that 100%, whether they're still, do you mean like pushing the water back out
Yeah,
through?
yes.
I don't know if they actually actively still do that or if they're just relying on the
I
chlorine.
remember when the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers declared war on zebra mussels in Lake Michigan. So
That's, yes, I'm not positive. I can get the answer for you because I can.
yeah,
but
I'd
I'm
be
not-
interested.
Sure, I can do that.
I mean, you have to be proactive that, they always, zebra mussels could come back for a second or third generation.
Mhm. Definitely.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. Through you to the presenter, thanks again. I just have some questions that are sort of in the gray area for me about our oversight, our role on council. And on page 47 of our agenda, which is the part that goes over the role of the councillor, there's a section that references the Safe Drinking Water Act. There's a section which quotes some stuff that came out of the Walkerton report.
Yes.
And there's some specific recommendations to people that oversee water, which includes us, because it's in this section, about things that we can do in a proactive way. So the first one is that we need to be acquainted with the legislation and the regulations, which we're sort of doing tonight. Learning about the facilities and the operation, which we're sort of doing tonight. But then it talks about stuff where we need to familiarize ourselves with the experience and background of senior staff. It talks about us setting policy direction. And since we brought water in-house, is there going to be an opportunity through you with our staff for council to look at the policy and take a proactive role and actually either saying that the policy is fine or subjecting it to our input? And will there be, like, what opportunity would I have as a councillor to understand the background and experience of the senior staff at the water?
Omar?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair, and with the question that you're asking, this is the opportunity for council and councillors individually and collectively to determine where their comfort level is. And the questions and comments that we're hearing tonight are wonderful stepping stones for moving forward. With regards to specifically the policy, happy to share, if you don't have it in the package, it's generally a one-page policy statement that is part of the package. So we can definitely review that either individually or as a separate presentation. With regards to staff's qualifications, training, and experience, you have my experience based on what I brought into the city as part of the hiring process. And we can also work through whether it's meeting staff in the field by visiting the sites and talking to the individual folks, both in the distribution, like the distribution system, the production and treatment system, as well as our engineering staff. Happy again to set up either individual or group sessions. Definitely would need to work through the clerk's office to confirm the process of doing that, whether they're constituting a meeting of council or if there's individual opportunities. And as well, because many of you have served on the board for, in some cases, years, there may be a comfort level that you already have where this additional training may not be necessarily valuable for you, but we would also suggest that, considering that we're now owning the system, it's an opportunity for a refresh.
Yeah, thank you. And the point I'm trying to make is that I don't have a problem being the figurehead of these complex things that I don't understand. But when I'm the figurehead of these things and there's like some major liability attached to it, it just raises some red flags for me. And then within the recommendations, it actually specifically recommends us to have certain input over certain things. And I don't really feel I understand as a counselor what the mechanisms are for us to have any oversight with any of these things besides just trusting the process, which I'm okay with. I'm not saying that I have distrust with the way that things are being managed, but I just hope that, you mentioned there would be some regular reports coming to us. That's good. But if we are charged with the responsibility of this in a very potentially drastic outcome, maybe further down the road, it would be beneficial for us to understand how we can actually oversee some of these things on a regular basis. Thank you.
I could answer a couple of those if that's okay. So a lot of the things that you're going to start to see as you see reports come to council will be on the water services. You've already approved 2 sort of water reports that were generated by our staff. You're also going to have input on rates. which is all based off our asset management program. You also approve the financial plan for the water. So as you sort of move forward with this ownership of the drinking water, you will become more familiar with the staff that work with the water services and how we present things to you. And at those times, that's when you have those opportunities to ask those questions that we're alluding to. But again, totally would love to have everybody out to the water plant and go through it. And then you can meet the staff that are there.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Baldwin?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, Patricia, nice to see you again. When we were on the PUC board, I can recall my first term of council, we had an on-site orientation. At that orientation, I'm going by memory now, so it's almost 11 years ago. We went to the classroom at the filtration plant. Mr. Stevenson introduced many of the operators there, and they explained their role. We also had a tour of the laboratory facilities and looked at some of those tests. And then we had our tour, and that was about a 2.5, 3 hour orientation. That allowed those of us, Councillor Vasiliadis was on the council at that time, Councillor Parnell, and Councillor Hickey, and Mayor Bennett at the time was the other representative. I found that very, very good, very, very helpful. We got to know the players. So just I want to reassure Councillor Burke that if we have that opportunity, it made me and my role much more comfortable knowing we had the experts in the field. Now, my question, Mr. Chair, through you. Patricia, where are you and your staff located now because of the transition? You used to be able to find you at the PUC. Where are you now?
We're exactly where you left us.
Same place.
Same places. Yes.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baldwin. Any further comments or questions? Tricia, thank you for all your hard work and everything you do. All right, so we have recommendations in front of us. I'll go to you, Councillor Reel, and perhaps you can add something about an orientation. That will be an orientation, but I leave that with you. Councillor Reel?
I don't think I need to resod sawdust, but I think Councillor Baldwin made a really good point. I have been on the PUC board. I've been on the Kofi board, so I had orientation. But there's a number of people here that haven't. And that's the point that I was trying to make. You know, tonight, here you're giving a report and a booklet, and you can read through it. You can say, well, somebody could say, well, you've had your training. That is not training, as far as I'm concerned. We need to have the orientation of all the people because you're now responsible. We need a go out to the water treatment plant, also the lab, and see the facility and meet the people that are working to keep our water safe. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Also, on here, because a number of us were on the PUC board, I do not see a list here of when the times that we're going to meet as the city PUC board to have a meeting, because we had meetings all the time, either monthly or quarterly, and we were given the reports of how the business was running, decisions that we were going to make, which was the water rates. We were going to increase the water rates or whatever, but I don't see anything here of a schedule for meetings for the new PUC board. And it should be here.
Commissioner Simonovsky, so two things, the schedule, and do you need a motion for an orientation, or can you work with the clerk's office to put maybe two options together? I don't think all council has to be at the exact same time, maybe two options together for 2 half-day orientations. Is that feasible?
Yes, with regards to working with the clerk on identifying how we can bring everybody to that and through that process, for sure. And with regards to a schedule, there are a couple of key mandatory reporting periods. As well, staff will bring forward reports to council as either deemed necessary or as requested. They're typically, in my experience, and on the municipal side, isn't specifically sort of monthly water reports. It's more based on either questions or drivers in the business that we would bring forward a report, or the council or a councillor would request information on a specific item that we would either bring through a channel of communication or at the table here.
Well, I kind of question then why I went out to Ashburnham Drive to a meeting that might be an hour or 2 hours if you're going to bring a report to council. Because it was a specific meeting that I went to and a number of us, and it had to do with PUC business. Not coming here and a report in a book, and this is your report. Then I wasted 2 hours of my time going out to Ashburn Drive to a meeting. When, if that's what you're going to do, I'm sorry. Again, I'm impressing upon this council is responsible for water, not any staff, nobody, 11 people here. So I want as much information as I possibly can, because we're the ones that drive and make the decisions for the water for the taxpayers of the city of Peterborough. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Are you comfortable moving the report? Moved by Councillor Neal, A to D, and the commissioner and the clerk will get back to us with orientation sessions in the coming weeks/months. Councillor Crowley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, just further to Councillor Riel's mention of training, would it be, maybe this would be a better question for Commissioner Potts. I don't know if we were to, would it be appropriate to defer this until we have an on-site training session with all of council, where we go through the different, like the water systems and how everything functions, and sort of become mini experts on how the water system works in the city of Peterborough? Would it then be appropriate to come back and adopt this, or would a deferment be in order in this case, do you feel, or should we adopt this? Commissioner Potts?
Mr. Chair, I think I'm going to defer to the subject matter expert, my colleague, the Municipal Operations Commissioner.
Commissioner?
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Potts. With regards to the operation of the system, and I want to be very clear with council on this, this is not a moment of huge responsibility that's being thrust upon councillors. Realizing that there are certified, highly trained operation staff that work through regulatory requirements of the province. There's licenses, there's probably, well, for every operator, there's a license on the wall, you'll see, and they're regularly trained. There's a large amount of hours that they have to go into. As well, the system is overseen by professional engineers, which we fall under our own Professional Engineering Act, which gives us a huge amount of liability. And we are between you and the issues. It is my responsibility to ensure that you're aware of the issues that happen. My negligence in not reporting those issues puts me directly in front of those fines, because I am subject to that as well. So just to give you some assurance that this is not handing over full responsibility to council in the context of what's going on out there. It's really us. I am responsible, the CAO is responsible to ensure that you have the information that you need, and any negligence on my part does not expose you directly in the context of what's been presented tonight. That being said, I'm okay with the direction of a deferral, as this is not critical to be approved. It's really accepted for information from the perspective of your comfort. I'm very happy to work to ensure that you all have the level of comfort and awareness and understanding of the system, so you can actually feel comfortable and sleep at night. So that is our commitment to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Simpsonovskis. Councillor Crowley?
Asked and answered. I think I'm good. Okay,
thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. Councillor Burke?
Chair Beamer, thank you through you to Commissioner Simonovsky. I think the question that I have is picking up from where the point Councillor Riel was trying to make. And excuse me if this is stuff that we've already talked about in depth or if it's in the report, but I think he was pointing to the fact that the water system was brought in-house. And can you just clarify to us how that changes our role in terms of the board and council? Like, is there still a board of directors?
Through Mr. Chair, there isn't so much a board of directors in between. So council is the board. And if in the documentation, and I'm happy to go over this if it's not readily available, there is actually an organizational structure that identifies council as the owner of the system. The CAO is within that, next in line, myself next in line, and then we move through the management structure. Our finance commissioner is also very much in that pecking order to ensure that the financial support needed for the system is also approved and supported. His liability is also attached to that organizational structure. So happy to go through that either separately or as a council discussion as well.
Yeah, thanks. And through the chair, that's how I understood it. And I think the point the councillor was making, which is also a question of mine, is that when we heard that structure was changing, where there is no longer a board that we've heard people have sat on at council, I guess we assumed that we would become the board in some capacity and that we would be meeting regularly to discuss specifically issues that had to do with water, instead of just folding those into like reports when it makes sense. So is there a plan for us as council to meet regularly to replace the position that the board held?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify here that there are a lot of other municipalities which are taking care of the water systems, and this was a very specific when the PUC was there. Because at the end of the day, even the PUC were there. If yesterday, I will say that if something would have happened, at the end of the day, this council was still responsible. It was not the PUC board, because at the end, the asset belonged to us. So I just want to clarify that. So
I get that through the chair. I understand that, but I'm just saying, like, what happened to the board? Because the board was making decisions that specifically had to do with the water. I was under the assumption that responsibility would be transferred to us, and that we would be meeting regularly, maybe quarterly, not at a council meeting, but at a water specific meeting as members of council. And I'm hearing now that that's not the case. Are staff making those decisions that the board was previously making?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at the end of the day, all the decisions will be more, the council is the board, and we will also do some benchmarking and bring it so that we are at par with everybody. So what is happening at the other municipalities so I will request the Commissioner of Municipal Operations so that we are at par, whatever, because this is highly regulated. So we want to do the things which everybody else, what is happening in the region of Peel, the largest water supplier in the whole country. So we want to do the benchmarking, and then we will come back.
Okay, Councillor Burke, would you like your second 5 minutes? All right, thank you, CEO Arena. Councillor DeGay and Mayor Leal. Councillor DeGay.
Try that again. Thank you, Chair Beamer. From my perspective, we are already responsible for municipal water. And equally, the municipality, as I spoke to the delegate, that the municipality has 3 board members that serve on the Conservation Authority, which provide oversight vis-a-vis source water protection. I see this as a report. It's for information only. And it's the beginning of our training, and I'm acknowledging, and I support Councillor Riel's comment about some additional supplementary training, including the Conservation Authority. That'd be appropriate. This is the beginning. And so to Councillor Crowley, I'm not sure if we're proceeding with the deferral. Thank you for that nod, but we're already responsible. This is an important first step, and I anticipate more of the same, and I would welcome the opportunity for training. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Leal and Councillor Baldwin. Mayor Leal.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Commissioner Semenowski. Ilmar, it might be helpful if we get the link. I think members of council would really profit from reading the executive a summary of the O'Connor inquiry into Walkerton. I do know there were 23 recommendations. As a newbie in provincial parliament 2003, Premier McGinty made it mandatory reading for every new MPP coming in. And I think it would be very helpful because the 23 recommendations became the foundation of the Clean Water Act of the province of Ontario. And it will address some of the responsibilities, liabilities that Councillor Burke has raised and others. And to understand that is to understand how the emergence of that legislation happened, and ultimately the responsibility of municipally elected officials when it comes to the provision of water. So that might be helpful. The other comment, Mr. Chair, would make just in defense of the ag community of the province of Ontario. After Walkerton, farms that were adjacent to waterways all had to put in place an environmental farm plan, became mandatory. And Part B of the Environmental Farm Plan was the Nutrient Management Act, which is a fancy term managing liquid manure, which was the source of E. coli in terms of the Walkerton tragedy.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. Commissioner.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair, happy to share that link as well as the link with the training through the Clean Water Center in Walkerton. And I do also want to say I really appreciate the interest and enthusiasm of all of you in this particularly important portfolio. So by all means, this is a wonderful, wonderful start to our new ownership.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Baldwin?
Mr. Chair, has the report been moved?
Yes, Councillor Real.
Okay, I would suggest that we call the question.
All right, moved by Councillor Baldwin. Call the question.
Point of order.
Procedural point of order, yes.
Thank you. Robert's Rules of Order suggests that the first, second, and third time speakers is a sequence to be followed. In the situation where the question is being called or a speaker is calling the question, and that speaker has spoken more than once, and there's a speaker in the speakers list who had their hand raised, as in myself, to speak for the first time. I'm wondering if it's possible if the chair could pose to the mover that we follow Robert's rules about first, second, and third time speakers.
Councillor Cheek, it's a very good point. You are absolutely correct. That is Robert's Rules of Order, but we don't follow Robert's Rules of Order. We follow our own procedural bylaw. However, when the time comes to review our procedural bylaw, maybe that's a very fair suggestion. But under our procedural bylaw, I do not have that authority.
If I may, through you,
So
Chair.
that is carried. Just quickly, Councillor Chuka.
There's an absence of language on it, and it also speaks in our procedural bylaw to refer to Robert's Rules of Order where there is a gap in information. Thank you.
There's no gap on this one. All right, so that is carried. So we will take a vote. Moved by Councillor Real. Yeah, no, we got to vote on the main motion. And that is carried. Thanks, everyone. Next item, Heatherington Park parking restrictions. Councillor Real.
Through the chair, I think I would leave moving this because it's in North Crest, but I want to speak to it.
Yeah, that's okay.
We have two councillors here from North Crest, so if they'd like to move it, I think they had a lot to do with it, but I would like to ask, I have some questions.
Moved by Councillor Hakey. Councillor Real, you have the floor.
Okay.
Thank you for the shout out, though.
So my question is to Commissioner Nelson. I'm reading through this here, and certainly there seems to be a problem with Heatherington for public works. So has staff done or looked at the rest of the streets in the city of Peterborough that might be having the same problem? It looks like this is a one-off. I could bring something next week. Councillor Baldwin and I, this street is having a problem picking up garbage or whatever it is, snow plowing or whatever. This week it's Heatherington. So or maybe it's Commissioner Simonowski, Public Works. Have they got a list of streets that have complained from our workers about picking up the garbage or snow plowing or whatever? Because next week I could bring one and next week it'd be somebody else. So is there a list of streets that potentially need this kind of review?
Through the chair to Councillor Riel, there might very well be a list. Unfortunately, at this point, this was a location that was an actual motion of council for staff to review and come back to council with a report. So that's why we're here with the report tonight.
Through the chair to Commissioner Nelson, I understand that. But next week I could bring one. And it could be continuing going on. My street has experienced the same thing, my street. So what I'm saying is wouldn't it behoove somebody to have a list of, are we getting complaints from our public works or from picking up garbage or snow plowing, that this is an habitual problem throughout the city? But also, this council also passed a pay in lieu of parking. That means their streets are going to be filled with cars, because we passed that. And I think the point I made, especially in downtown, when you have that, you have no parking. People are going to park in the street. So we almost made a problem for ourselves. So that's just the point I'm trying to make.
Thank you very much, Councillor Riel. Councillor Akey?
Thank you very much. Maybe I can help Councillor Riel. We are special in North Crest. We get specialty. Actually, the street is if you've driven on it, it's rural at the north end and it's urbanized at the south end. It's located by the university. And my car's not that big and I have a hard time getting down there. But it was very important for not just the public works that was having issues, but for the residents that are there. And I thank you for getting back with the report. That's relatively quick, but it is needed. And to Councillor Riel's point, I'm sure there are other spots in the city. We just happen to get on this before you. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Any further comments or questions? All right, we'll take a vote. And thanks, everyone. That's unanimous, so I'm sure that'll be the case in the future. 13D, 107 Park Street North, Councillor Riel.
Through the chair to Mr. Nelson, and certainly I wasn't on this call, so perhaps you can give me some information here. I know we're talking about okay, I'll move the report just so we can for demolition. But did anybody ask the representative from General Electric what they're going to do about remediation of the property? Because historically, and if you look across Ontario and the brownfields that we have, the corporation drops the buildings or removes the buildings, put a fence around it, and there it sits. And we're going to inherit another huge brownfield in the city. So I don't know who was on the call with the representative from General Electric, but was the question asked, are you going to remediate the property?
Through the chair to Councillor Riel, I will start, and I may defer to Director Appleby for some additional supplementary information, but it's my understanding through some of the correspondence with the property owner that they have put forward basically a plan, because again, this initially is about them managing the property, managing their risk, and managing their basically cost to maintain the property and move, and basically just that, hold the property and maintain it. So from that perspective, right now, what we're dealing with is the application that they've applied for the demolition. That's the initial point of the information. They did supplement that information that provided some details around how they're proposing to do some, I guess, some screening, some upgrades, some mechanisms around landscaping of the property when the buildings come down, for the purposes of trying to improve aesthetics until such time that they have a longer term plan. Because as I say, right now their interest is in doing that, mitigating the property and maintaining the property from a perspective of risk management and cost management. So as I say, I'll maybe defer to Director Appleby if he has more information that should be supplemented to that.
Through the chair, so applications have been filed with the city in terms of site plan approval or amending an existing site plan. Some of the material that's been shared with us through that application shows the property, the buildings being demolished, kind of being brought down to kind of a cement pad state, if you will. And then some on-site work around landscaping and funneling water kind of where it needs to go to ensure that there's not going to be off-site impacts from a stormwater point of view. And that's about the extent of it. They don't have kind of a redevelopment plan in place right now for the buildings that are, for the land that is, for lack of a better term, being freed up. They are looking to kind of contain what they have, is my understanding. And in terms of cleanup, that's really, I guess, a question that we'd want to pose to them. But there's nothing that they're doing right now that would trigger sort of the city's ability to ask them to clean up, in terms of requiring records of site condition or anything like that, because they're not proposing a change in land use at this point in time.
I'm through the chair, and I'm wondering why that question wasn't asked at the meeting. I spent 38 and a half years working at General Electric. My last job, I was the full-time president there. We had the largest intake clinic in Canada at the Healthy Planet, and OCal was the one that put the people through it. And at the end of the day, I said to them, what were your findings from the day you were here? And they said, we have never seen so many chemicals used in one place anywhere in the world, and we never have seen so many diseases in one place in Canada like there is here. And that's what I'm pressing upon you, that it's all right to drop these buildings down and maybe save some of them, the buildings, but we're going to inherit this problem just like we did with OMC. And this is a huge problem. It's built on a swamp, and every chemical known to mankind is sitting there. And unless it's remediated by General Electric, we're going to have this cesspool and this piece of property in the center of the city. So that question should have been asked, or should be being asked, by General Electric. What is your plan to remediate and clean up this site? Because if that question isn't being asked, we're not doing our job. Me as a counselor and you as staff. Because that is the first question when that person phoned me, I would have asked, how are you going to remediate and clean up this property? Because we're going to inherit this, and it's going to be just a brownfield sitting there in the center of the city with a whole bunch of contaminants that are going to be there and leaching out into the neighborhood. So I'm sorry. Yes, we're here. We're talking about heritage and buildings and saving some buildings. The question should have been about remediating the property. That's where I am.
Thank you very much, Councillor Riel. Moved by Councillor Riel. I have Councillor Crowley, Lachika, Burke, Parnell, Hakey. Councillor Crowley.
Thank you, Chair. I have an amendment to this report I'd like to submit. And it's very wonderful speech by the last speaker. And to build on that, I apologize. Am I still able to get going?
Apologies. I had someone ask me where they were on the speakers list, but it's all you.
Okay, fair enough.
Yep.
So this amendment is, and I've given this to John, that as part of any approval for demolition at 107 Park Street North, the applicant will be required to provide the city with confirmation from a qualified person that a Phase 2 environmental site assessment has been completed and that any necessary remediation, containment, or monitoring plans are in place prior to or concurrent with demolition. Further, that securities be required to ensure compliance with any environmental obligation under provincial regulation.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It is tying any sort of environmental obligation or environmental impact that could result from the demolition. And it doesn't, I know that there is a 60-day, I believe, limit. It's not limiting them to not demolish the property. It's just tying it with an environmental assessment.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor
Chair.
Crowley. Thank you. So I'll just go down the list. So we're just speaking to this amendment. If approved, would become D. So I'll just go down the list. If you want to speak to the amendment, great. And if not, I'll keep you on the list for the full motion. Councillor Lachika, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Yes, thank you through you, Chair. I'm appreciating everything that Councillor Riel led with, and I'm appreciating the amendment to the motion. However, I think it doesn't go quite far enough. And GE, the Thomas Edison Company, yes, cultural significance on a Canadian level, since the mid-late 1800s. Councillor Burke and myself were so struck by this report in so many different ways that we spent 2 hours with Elwood Jones at the Trent Valley Archives this past weekend, not only researching its historic significance, but its legacy in terms of the town of Widows that we viewed in 2019, based on research that was done in 2014 and kept coming forward, and reports, legal reports that were initiated by Unifor on behalf of workers who suffered from the toxic legacy that was GE. And how can we even consider a demolition application, which we received back on September 8th? I don't even see that application within this report. And the purpose of it was to provide 60 days for council to review the heritage value. We did not see this ERA report until we received the agenda a day before the public. We've had a few days to look over this hefty report without us being provided with the formal notification from GE, without any information until a few days ago, the same information that the public is just getting. That is not acceptable. We don't have any environmental impact assessment included in this report. That should be the bottom line. We have no confirmation that hazardous material abatement will occur should any demolition happen. There would be particulates in the walls, in the floorboards of some of those buildings that would be disrupted. What about the hazardous waste removal that would need to occur? We need to care about our public, our families in the area, not just in the area, but in our city, because of where that is going to go. And we need to put people in community over corporate approvals. We need to put consultation before permissions and permits. All of this should be happening before considering a permit. And all of this should be happening in the public domain because it's designated based on the recommendation of the PACAC committee. We received a letter just today, an hour before the meeting, from Stuart Hamilton, the chair of PACAC, saying that according to Section 4, in this situation, and when it was listed in the criteria that is involved with this particular site, it needs to come to PACAC. For the people of this city who have contributed to GE as workers, who have lost family members because of the toxic legacy, and because of its historic value, federally and provincially and locally, we need to do our due diligence. And I encourage this council to do everything, including an environmental impact assessment prior to any consideration of anything else. But first of all, it goes to PACAC to hear their word on the heritage designation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chica. So I gave Councillor Chica a lot of leeway there. Just a friendly reminder, we're just speaking to the amendment in front of us. So Councillor Burke, did you want to speak to the amendment or hold off?
Chair Beamer, thank you. I'd like to speak to the amendment.
Okay, if we can just keep it to the amendment.
And I definitely wholeheartedly support the amendment. I want to thank Councillor Crowley, because to me also the report, was about the main report. I felt like before we even begin to discuss heritage timelines or site plan conditions, we need to pause and talk about the real issue that is underlying all this, the understory to General Electric, the issue of contamination and public safety. And, I say this as someone who is a lifelong person who has lived in this city, but also as someone who represents people that live, families that live on the fence line of that factory. This is an atypical demolition situation for us. I doubt there will ever be another one like this. And so my first thought was, oh, we can't fumble our way through this in 2 meetings in the middle of agenda. We need to, in the middle of a packed agenda, we need to pause and really think through what is being presented here. General Electric has been around, I'm bad with numbers, but over 100 years, I think. And, you know, it's not a completely negative. I've heard lots of beautiful stories from friends of mine who give General Electric credit for making their families middle class and having a life that they could not have found otherwise. Elwood showed us beautiful stories, pictures of the building where they made the streetcars in Peterborough. There's a beautiful history here, which we can, which I commend staff for their staff recommendations for us to be considering, to be considering through the staff recommendations. But we're talking about an amendment that deals with the contamination on the site. And, you know, Councillor LaChica mentioned the Unifor report, which is a huge report. And there's a lot of detailed information there about tangibly what went on and what is held in those buildings and in the ground at General Electric. I also have an intake hazard map here that actually in color-coded icons states and shows specifically where all of these chemicals were housed and used and stored and removed. And they're chemicals like arsenic, asbestos, beryllium, cadmium, chromium, uranium, and the list goes on. And so again, I bring you back to the fact that we have families and residents that are living on the fence line of this potential demolition. And, you know, if you were living on the fence line of General Electric, would you have concerns if you heard that after 100 years, these buildings they were contemplating the demolition of these buildings? I think we have to look into it. And my question for staff through the chair would be to Mr. Nelson, please. Has a designated substances and hazardous materials survey been completed for the buildings proposed for demolition? Or if you don't know that because we're dealing with a private property, would that be something that you, city staff, would need to see to approve the demolition?
Through the chair, to Councillor Burke, I will answer initially and then maybe defer to others for augmentation. But it's my understanding through this process, as part of it would be the requirement of the private property owner to ensure that they're meeting. This is not something that currently the city regulates. This would be a provincially regulated through dealing with hazardous materials, et cetera, in which they would have to have the material designation and the substance surveys done, and then an abatement program put in place, and would have to meet the requirements of that for the purposes of ensuring that public health, et cetera, would be looked after. We would ask those questions, but I don't think it's not within our purview or authority to or basically require that be in place. That falls under the my understanding of provincial guidance.
Thanks, and I'll just keep going with my time if I go over.
Yep.
Chair,
you'll be going into your second in about 15 seconds. So.
Yeah, and so the question is, did our staff receive, because this then asked me at staff for permission to demolish my garage property, right? We all understand how this is really different than that. When we get a demolition request, does our staff make those calls to the ministry and to the province and to say, guys, like just an FYI, we received a demolition proposal.
Just pull your mic, if you can just pull it out, Councillor Burke. It's flashing so people at home can't hear you.
Thank you. I hope that's reflected in my time. Respectfully. So my question is that when, like, I'm making the point that this is very different from me wanting to demolish my residential building on my property, right? This Councillor Riel said this is a factory that has contained every chemical known to man. The chart points that out. So when our staff received this very unique request for a demolition, did we get on the phone with the province and the ministry and say, hey guys, just an FYI, this is what we're being asked here. How do we approach this? Like, are we siloed off, or are we actually being proactive with trying to mitigate the risk attached to this?
Through the chair to Councillor Burke, my understanding is there's a separate process that is in place. This would be a project on a scale such that a notice of project would have to be filed with the Ministry of Labor, and that in itself would help basically notify the provincial authorities as to such projects that are being undertaken, such that they would have that eye on the project.
Thank you, through the chair. I know that as well as the structures of the buildings, which is my understanding that they have been sort of stripped down bare at this point, and it's my understanding that General Electric, or the subsidiary company that General Electric has created, that we're dealing with, General Electric Verona, it's my understanding that this is an operational thing for them. It's just easier for them to operate a site without a building on it for a lot of reasons. The question is, in a demolition like this, of this nature, we know that General Electric has holding tanks for chemicals underneath the ground. We know that there's a dedicated sewer system that was built from General Electric to Little Lake, where industrial waste was disposed of. Is there a risk that any of these things underground would be affected by the demolition of the buildings, and how do we oversee that none of that stuff happens?
Through the chair to Councillor Burke, again, this would be a requirement that would fall on the property owner. Again, it's their responsibility. To my knowledge, city staff have not been provided any specific site basically review and confirmation of materials that are on the site. So again, it falls back to the property owner in this circumstance, in which, you know, the property owner is doing, my understanding is that's what the property owner is looking to do, to try and help mitigate their ongoing management of the property and to deal with those materials. But again, from this perspective, I know there's been a couple of historic events in which the property owner did respond to those events and has dealt with those events through oversight by Ministry of and basically Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and has put things in place to mitigate such. So they would have to continue to do such.
Would through the chair, would Councillor Crowley's motion amendment addition, would that allow us to have some real answers here and actually know what we're approving when we approve a demolition?
Through the chair to Councillor Burke, I think under the terms of the demolition, this is an application through to the chief building official, and currently I'm not certain that the city has the grounds to enforce and ensure that we have that requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. So speaking to the amendment, if try your best, Councillor Purnell, Hakey, Lachika second time, Mayor Leal, Councillor DeGay. Councillor Purnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can certainly appreciate the comments of my colleagues, and the legacy of the site is definitely a major issue within our community. But that's not what we're dealing with this evening. We're dealing with a comprehensive report to deal with the heritage of this property. They will be seeking a demolition permit, which is something we've been waiting years and years and years to have some remediation, some work done on this property. And it's a step in the right direction. It's not the whole answer, but there will be next steps. But it's a step in the right direction. And Mr. Chair, I don't feel that this holding up the demolition permit, although this is incredibly well intentioned, holding up a demolition permit that's not really ours to hold up is the collateral that maybe is being perceived as. And so through you, Mr. Chair, if I could seek clarification of that either to Commissioner Nelson or Commissioner Potts, if we hold up this report to try and delay the demolition permit, will it compel the property owner to abide by this amending motion?
Through the chair to Councillor Purnell, I'll make an initial attempt and possibly defer to Commissioner Potts to augment if necessary. It's my understanding that the property owner, if we exceed the 60 days, there has been some indication that the property owner would work with the city based on the timelines. However, if it was given indication that we would exceed the 60 days, the property owner would have the right to defer it to Heritage Act and the overseeing body, I'll possibly refer to. I don't think it's the OLT in this circumstance, but basically could defer it to the overseeing body in order to engage a ruling. From that, then it would be the expectation that we try to work with the proponent to come to that discussion. But again, not certain that we're in a perspective that we can demand such information out of them at this time in order through that process. But I will defer to Commissioner Potts if he has anything to augment on that.
Mr. Chair, I'll stay high level for open session. To the extent that the motion relates to what would ultimately be a demolition permit process, that process is administered by the chief building official, who takes direction from the Act, the Building Code Act, and the Building Code. And in terms of the specifics of what would be required in terms of environmental matters, that would be for the chief building official to glean from the Building Code a very lengthy technical prescriptive document. And the chief building official is compelled to issue a permit unless it doesn't comply, the proposed work doesn't comply with applicable law. It's a default, they must. But I think the key point for council is that that's not a council process and it's not a staff process except for the chief building official, who's a statutory officer. That's the one comment that I would make in relation to the demolition permit process. The second is that, and the comments have been made, the issue for council this evening, the singular issue is whether to initiate anything related to the intention to designate the process under the Ontario Heritage Act. So now that, because this is a listed property, council has been given a 60-day opportunity, prescribed by statute. I know the report mentions the negotiation. I think the assumption should be made that council has 60 days. And within that period of council, we're conditionally intending to initiate the notice of intention to designate. Then because council has a heritage committee, it must consult with the heritage committee. But that's only after council has made the threshold determination contemplated by the report, whether to initiate it at all. In terms of the process for what's required with a notice of intention to demolish, which is what's been received, there is no list that's been established to my knowledge. I defer to my staff colleagues of plans and information that is required to accompany the notice of intention to demolish that's been given. Having said that, information and plans, and I think a heritage impact assessment has been provided proactively. Thank you.
So, Brown, would you like to
Thank
go
you.
into your second 5 minutes?
I can have two quick
Okay.
questions on the amendment. So just for absolute clarity, who owns the site and the responsibility of the contamination on the site? Through you, Mr. Chair. To whoever.
Through the chair to Councillor Parnell, that would remain with the property owner.
Thank you. That was the answer I expected. It's not our responsibility at this point. And through you, Mr. Chair, if we don't take advantage of this offer, this next step to actually do some mitigation work on this property, could they just walk away and say, okay, never mind, we won't bother. See you in 50 years? Through you, Mr. Chair? Maybe that's a rhetorical question.
Through the chair to Councillor Purnell, I guess anything is possible. The reality being is that the property owner would still be responsible to mitigate risks and associated with the site. And again, if they chose just to let it go derelict, then obviously, the city would have to look at what options the city has, in either through city bylaws or provincial legislation, to require from a perspective of health and safety and how well the site is secured from that perspective in terms of what does need to be done in order to protect public health and safety.
Thank you. So I believe it's in our best interest to be proactive on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Purnell. I have Councillor Hakey, Lachika second time, Mayor Leal, Councillor DeGay, Real a second time. Councillor Hakey?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just so I can get some clarification, I want to make sure I understand this. If I'm understanding it correctly, and I don't know if it's Commissioner Potts or Nelson that can answer this for me, we're really dealing, or we're trying to deal with two different issues. One is heritage and one is environmental. Am I correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Hakey, the staff report is proposing to deal with the heritage issue.
I'm sorry, I'll rephrase it. With the addition of Councillor Crowley's amendment, are we trying to tie an environmental process that appears to be governed by the province at their purview with our bylaws? Is that what we're trying to do?
Through the chair to Councillor Hakey, I suspect, but I would defer to Councillor Crowley to answer that appropriately.
I think I have a clear idea. If I'm not mistaken, the provinces are the only people that can order a cleanup. Am I correct?
Through the chair, that's my understanding.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much. My other question is, has GE said that they'd be in favor of designating this property as a heritage site? Have we asked them?
Through the chair to Councillor Hakey, the heritage impact assessment has basically indicated that the recommendation to the property owner is to protect and maintain and basically do some protection measures associated with specific buildings that they deem have heritage value on the site. As far as I think, and I'll defer to others, I think it stays silent on the actual designation, but they're going so far as basically recommending protection of those certain buildings that they deem have heritage value. So therefore, from that perspective, they see value in those buildings.
So through you, Chair, because I have to make sure I understand this, have we asked GE as part of this if they want it to be designated?
Commissioner Nelson?
That's not what I'm asking.
Through the chair to Mr. Councillor Hakey, I'll possibly defer to Director Appleby, but I'm not so certain that specific question, again, it kind of falls out of the heritage impact assessment under the premise that they are anticipating the protection of certain buildings that have heritage value. So I think there's some level of expectation that would be a consideration, but I don't know if Director Appleby has got more information on that. I'll defer.
Director Appleby?
Through the chair, I would suggest the question hasn't been put point blank as you're suggesting here. We've certainly had, we've received material from them. I've had the opportunity to speak with some of their consultants. I understand that they are committed to, protecting some of the buildings on site, and that's driven from a heritage perspective. But in terms of whether they want to see the property designated, we've not posed that directly to them.
Thank you very much. So my only concern, it's actually good to hear that I think everybody knows where I stand with heritage. I understand they produce a report, that I get, but they still haven't said whether they support the report or not. And I know it might be splitting hairs, but that is a concern of mine. If they say, yes, in fact, we agree with this, I'm on board with them with saving it. But if the question, and I don't even know who would ask that question, if we ask it, if you want to ask it, I don't know that you want to actually ask that question, but it's funny that they produce a report that is supporting heritage on one hand, So I don't, unless they're telling me yes, to me, it's a no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Councillor Chika, second time.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Beamer. The ERA report just struck me completely clearly that there was support for the heritage attributes of this site. That's why this company spent time and money on doing that. That to me isn't the question. The question that we should be asking is, what does the public and our public committee for architectural advisory, what do these people who we've appointed to make these decisions, what do they feel? And let's hear them speak. We're remiss that we don't have a director of heritage to speak to right now, or a manager position, because this is really critical. This has been in the public trust and the public life, this particular site, for almost 200 years or 150 years. How can we not acknowledge the impact to the history of this city, that the decisions that we're making in these next 60 to 30 days are going to make? They're significant. And the future land use is so significant, and the health and safety of our children and grandchildren, based on the decisions that are made around potential demolition, should be ours to make, carry, and oversee. And yes, ultimately the ministry is the checkpoint for these things, but we deserve transparency, oversight, and meaningful protections of our public. That's why we're elected. And this is in our ward and in the core and the nucleus of our city. And every decision we make today and going forward on this is going to impact the future. So we need to think about it, and we need to give it right away. And I look at the main motion to PACAC to hear from them, and then take it from there. And this to me is more of an addition to part of the main motion. Really, this is about tonight. The purpose of the report is whether to designate part of this GE site or buildings under the Ontario Heritage Act with strategies to mitigate potential demolition. But the owner did not say anything about the elephant in the room, which is the toxic legacy that has existed there and that continues to impact those buildings today. Something's going to happen when that's disrupted. We need to be the councillors that do our due diligence to protect our public as any decisions that way are made after it goes to PACAC. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chika. Mayor Leal, Councillor DeGay, Councillor Real, second time, Crowley, second time, Burke, third and final. Mayor Leal.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'll start by saying my father had a career of 40 years at GE, and over that period of time, I was in that plant on numerous occasions, open houses, etc., and retirements for a couple of my friends, Glenn Padgett and Jack Dorr. So I'm very familiar with the plant. And just to add, for 15 years, Mr. Chair, when I was the provincial member of Parliament, I or my staff dealt with WSIB cases related to GE. Mr. Chair, if I get a bit emotional, many a time I had widows in my office crying over the loss of a husband, or a husband that was in the late stages of suffering from various forms of cancer. And my staff and I were tenacious in getting many of these cases solved and to bring justice to those families. I had the opportunity to work with Sue James and Ingrid Buck on many of these cases, and also a legend in the labor movement here in Peterborough, John Ball, who in fact put together that map that Councillor Burke has. He on his own accord went into that plant, identified all the hot spots, in terms of contaminants. And rest in peace, Mr. Wall, because your work really put a foundation to what we know about that plan. And I also worked with the leadership of Unifor on these cases. So I take no lessons from anybody when it comes to understanding GE and the legacy that this company has in this community. But Mr. Chair, I want to ask Mr. Nelson a couple questions. Interesting enough that the OMC demolition went by and nobody really batted an eyelash. And there's those that say that the OMC site perhaps was even more contaminated than the GE site. But I'll certainly leave that judgment call to people that are much more knowledgeable than I. But I do want to ask a question, Mr. Nelson, with regards to the OMC site, because the approach is not radically different. Mr. Nelson, in terms of the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, it was my understanding that the demolition was informed by an abatement of hazardous materials identified in designated substance surveys that were performed on the buildings to be demolished, and the demolition was performed in accordance with the guidelines and regulations regarding such. Mr. Nelson, who was responsible for that? Was it the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks that dictated the abatement in terms of the demolition of those buildings?
Through the chair to Mayor Leo, basically that's correct. It is the provincial regulations that dictate those reviews and the surveys of designated materials be completed, and then that abatement program was basically put together for this specific based on those designated material surveys. So when the contractor is in, they know basically what materials they're having to deal with, how to handle them, the proper processes, where they're to be basically disposed of, and they have to create and how to handle them and transfer them appropriately according to those guidelines and regulations. So that was performed through that, and a lot of those were done by consultants that were hired that are experienced and qualified in those areas. And then based on those surveys, the abatement program was created by an environmental consultant that basically understands that legislation and gives those directions accordingly.
Mr. Chair, if I could continue, then Mr. Nelson, that is the exact same process that GE will be required to follow. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that would be correct.
So if I could continue, Mr. Chair, then I believe in the OMC site, was it Cambrian that was tasked to put this together on behalf of the Provincial Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks?
Through the chair to the mayor, it was Cambium Environmental. Now, the Cambium Environmental did work in this circumstance for the city under the premise that the city was and is the current owner of the site, of the OMC site.
Really, would you like your second 5 minutes?
I'm going to hold for my second 5.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, thanks, Mayor. Councillor DeGay.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. To my colleague, Councillor Crowley, Ontario Regulation 15304 does not allow, in which you're reading this as I am, and it doesn't allow the municipality to require a phase 1 or a phase 2 environmental site assessment unless there's a change in land use contemplated, which there's not in this case. My understanding, and I have read, like I think all of us, in detail, the Heritage Impact Assessment report. It's very thorough, and it's very clear in my mind that it's the intention of the property owner to protect, preserve, and thus I think they'd be favorable to a designation of the more office-orientated buildings. I think we can look as a council as an example where such a result occurred, and that is the former Alpha Laval site, home now of Staples and Home Depot, but the municipality, they were able to preserve the important office buildings. So that's a result. Commissioner Nelson has reminded us that the if a demolition were to proceed, that it is subject to provincial oversight and very, very strict regulation, abatement programs. And if there are materials that have contamination, the manner in which they have to be treated, how they're removed, and to what extent, what landfill sites they go to. That's all provincially regulated. That is not our responsibility. Our responsibility this evening is to decide if we wish to proceed with the designation of our property, and it includes the demolition of buildings. It has been described that the buildings will be removed to concrete pads, and thus I would suspect leaving the bulk of the soil, which may or may not have contaminations, in place. So to Councillor Cripp, I might, Mr. Chairman, in summary to Councillor, I understand the intent of your motion, but if there was a change in land use being contemplated, number one, this would be subject likely to land use approval application filed with the city. We'd be looking at a phase 1, phase 2 site environmental site assessment, record of site condition, all the intended studies. All that's being asked for is a demolition, which is not a change in land use, and thus we can't really impose this as a condition. And to Councillor Hakey's point, having read this report, if the property owner went to this extent to produce a heritage impact assessment, my conclusion is such that I've read that they are prepared to see those buildings, the green color, I think blue color buildings being preserved and thus designated. Those are my comments. Thank you. But if I might conclude, I do appreciate that this property rests in a location that's in proximity to residential properties. His worship just referenced another case where the demolition was subject to this provincial program, and I'm completely satisfied that will occur in an appropriate and professional manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor DeGay. Councillor Reel, second time.
Through the chair, I understand the report was here for heritage and a demolition. And if you look at the map, the blue, which is owned by BWTX, has nothing to do with heritage. It has to do with that's their business. The one in green is the buildings that you see on 107 Park Street, which is probably one of the original buildings that I think that should be preserved. And there's offices in there now and people working in the building. Anything going west will be demolished. The point that I'm trying to make is that a history here that I know of General Electric, certainly, and the demolition of plants around North America. So they're going to drop these buildings, put a fence around it, maybe bring some topsoil in, sod it, or seed it, and a couple of trees, and that's it. But I'm talking about what's underneath the ground is a complete, it's built, GE was built on a swamp. And in that swamp is every chemical known to mankind, great big soup that's sitting there that needs to be remediated. If you look at the buildings on Park Street and you don't know them, but I do, was the armature department, the fractional motors, and certainly the plating shop. These are all, the plating shop probably used every chemical you could ever think of because it's plating material. They have all been taken down, fenced off, seeded, and trees planted. I don't think that the cedars survived because of what's underneath the ground, but underneath the ground was never remediated. And the point is making here that that's exactly what they're going to do is say, yeah, we'll save the building on Park Street. We want to drop all this here, but we're not going to do anything with this site. So if you read a report that I think come out either this week or last week from the city of St. Catharines, they're actually taking GM to court because they dropped their buildings and left this huge expanse filled with PCBs and all the rest of unusable land in the heart of their city. And they're suing GM to clean up their site. That's what we're here about talking tonight. Not just about heritage designation, because there is some heritage buildings here that maybe should be preserved. And they're willing to do that. I think that this council better get their act together, that you're going to end up with a huge great big brownfield in the city of Peterborough that has not been remediated and won't be remediated unless you have a viable business like you have GE and make them clean it up. Because they already know the cost. They do. They've been in business. This GE was in business for 138 years. They know exactly what it's going to cost to remediate that property. And it's not very favorable for them. And we, I think, as council, need them to be held their feet to the fire that you're going to clean up this site so that we can either they're going to sell it and do something with it, or we're going to do something with it. And I think it would be a beautiful site for housing and whatever we can do with that in the center of the city. So I think it behooves us to do something here tonight. Instead of just arguing back and forth, all we're here is to look at heritage and demolition and all this other stuff. It's this property. Because if you don't do something about it, all they're going to do is fence it off, put some seed down, plant a few trees, Bob's your uncle, and that site is still going to be contaminated. Just like the OMC site is contaminated, and we've taken that on as a responsibility, us saying, oh, the government's going to give us, say, well, we understand you've taken it on, the city. How many of these sites you're going to take on? Let's put the onus back on the owner of this site right here and get them to clean it up. Look at this site, look at the parking lot across the road that they can't sell, look at where the instrument lab was on Stewart Street, look at the parking lots. None of them have been sold because they're loaded with PCBs and other contaminants that could be used for housing. So I am supporting what Councillor Crowley is doing here. It isn't just about heritage. It just isn't about demolition. It's about cleaning up this crazy site.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Real. Councillor Crowley, second time.
Thank you, Chair. And I do understand that this debate's going on a very long time. However, I just wanted to say that I understand the point of the report was specific to heritage. However, I think that the first line saying that acknowledge the receipt of a notice of intention to demolish a portion of the industrial buildings is what triggered this, and hence my amendment. And I believe that we can compel the owner of a property that is considering demolition. I believe that we can, and we do have the ability as a city council to compel them to do a phase 2 assessment, and then report back to us or report back on what their remediation options would be moving forward. So that's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crowley. I have Councillor Burke, third and final. Lachika, third and final. Baldwin, Mayor Leo, second. Councillor Burke, third and final.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chair Beamer. I think it's frustrating that there isn't more of a genuine response to this, to look proactively between our city staff at what safeguards we can put in place right now to address the issue of the contamination on that site in what way that we can. I believe that we have a responsibility to do that. I support Councillor Crowley's motion for us to at least ask, because when we're asking the questions about has anyone asked, we're hearing it's sort of siloed off the people that deal with this. And this is a site that is in the city of Peterborough. It's different from a council perspective than the OMS site because we don't own the site. We bought the OMS site, and we've heard in depth by our council in camera about the extent of the contamination and the plans to remediate. We know that. In this case, we don't have a sense of that here. All we hear is that we're being asked to approve a demolition on a site that most of us understand intuitively is deeply contaminated. And what the councillor is asking is in our capacity that we ask the question to the owner, can they provide us with these things? And I think that's our responsibility to ask that, and I support that. I'll save it for the debate on the main motion, but if people believe that this is some impetus for a redevelopment at General Electric, I strongly disagree with that assumption. If you want to look at what happens to sites like this once the buildings are taken down, just go to the Formax site. Go to the Formax site. It is a concrete slab that's just been sitting there. And so, yes, we're bound by what we can and can't do at council. But I believe it is our responsibility, and I thank Councillor Crowley for asking this question, and at the very least, putting this question for what he's asking for to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. Councillor Lachika, third and final.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Beamer. And thank you to Councillor Riel for bringing up the St. Catharines story, because I had sent it out this afternoon. It's just October 2nd that this story was issued. And Penticton Herald was where a friend directed me to it. I found it there. It can be read, and you can see the comparisons. It's a nightmare what's happening, and we have the opportunity to do this the right way, to slow it down. This doesn't have to be done tomorrow. We can take it through the process that we should, to designate it, to have it be in the public domain, and then we can make careful decisions and ask the questions of GE, ask them and what we require, and make sure that the environmental impact assessment is done. This is not about whether the ministry will or will not supervise that this is done and ensure that it's done. We know that there's a conundrum in another city where this very thing has come up. We need to know that the public will be protected. And this is about public messaging to the folks that are on Albert Street, that are just yards away from where that demolition would occur. This would be disrupting the materials that have been there since 1890. And this is how many times exponentially larger than Outboard Motor Company. The land mass, it's such a difference, and the impact is so much greater. So it's difficult to compare the two. We need to be responsible, representing our community, bringing it to a heritage designation so that we can control it in terms of how it should be done. It's not our job. We will not be paying for this. We will not be overseeing it. But we need to make sure the transparency is there and that the public messaging is there so that there's public confidence that this is being done carefully. And it's our opportunity to demand that GE clean up their waste that's accumulated since 1890, and it's not on the backs of our public and our taxpayers to ever remediate this in the future. That is not the job of the taxpayers of Peterborough. It's the job of this company. So I thank you for the amendment, Councillor Crowley, and I look forward to moving this forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chika. Councillor Crowley, just for your consideration, just with legal thoughts, it is the CBO process, so it would be better if the motion were to be in effect that the CBO be requested for your consideration. All right, we'll keep going, then we'll take a vote soon. Councillor Baldwin, Mayor Leal a second time, Councillor DeGay a second time. Councillor Baldwin?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm going to pass on comments about the amendment. I'll save my comments for main debate. I suspect we'll have several people speaking several times when we get to the main motion, so I'll hold my time till then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Mayor Leal, second time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Mine is a question to Commissioner Potts. Through you, Commissioner Potts, what leverage does the city of Peterborough have to require GE to do remediation of the site outside of where my understanding was the province clearly would have jurisdiction? So what leverage do we have in all this?
Mr. Chair, for open session. I think there were some comments. I may have made some comments earlier to this effect. The demolition permit process under the Building Code Act is the responsibility of the chief building official. Council's responsibility is to appoint a chief building official, and then the process is governed either for a permit to construct or a permit to demolish, both covered under Section 8 of the Act. A chief building official is required. The statutory framework compels a chief building official to issue, in this case, a demolition permit when the city gets to that stage, because this is about the Ontario Heritage Act this evening. But when that permit application is made, the chief building official is compelled to issue the permit, provided it's applicable fees, the file is complete, and complies with applicable law, which is prescribed under the building code. And so the chief building official will go through the list. And in terms of what the chief building official may or may not require, it's with regard to the building code. And it's not, respectfully, the chief building official is expressly not directed by council in that respect. That's the message, and it may be an uncomfortable one, but it's what's in the act.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Potts, just to continue the line of question, then the chief building inspector is operating under the Heritage Act and provincial legislation. Is that correct, sir?
Mr. Chair, what the Ontario Heritage Act does is it compels the owner not to proceed to demolish, of course, with the proper permit, except on 60 days notice. So the issue for council tonight is whether to initiate the process by which council may, after hearing back from the Heritage Committee, if it chooses to do so, proceed with the process of a notice of intention to designate, which would be under the Ontario Heritage Act, which would give rise to GEPRs, the owner of the property, ability to object. And if council proceeds with a bylaw to designate to a full or a limited extent, whatever council would be intending to do, then to give rise to GEPR's right to appeal against the bylaw. But just in relation, with respect, I have to say it's in council's interest to take a look at that motion and understand that the chief building official can't be directed in the manner contemplated.
Mr. Chair, that would be my concern, that we have to be cautious in that we don't provide people with false hope in terms of what could conceivably be overreaching of our legislative authority. And I'm as concerned as anybody about this site. I'm also concerned when I hear that one neighborhood who have just faced this on Romaine Street is different from another neighborhood facing the same circumstances. My city of Peterborough is everybody's concerns are equally important. And I'll hold very much.
I'd like to put the question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, moved by Councillor DeGay to put the question. And that is carried. All right, so we'll move by Councillor Crowley. We'll take a vote on the amendment up on the screen. And that is lost. All right, we're back to the main motion. Councillor Purnell, ABC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to request that we separate out A, B, and C.
Okay.
And I do appreciate the mayor's comments about giving people false hope when we start talking about things that are beyond our jurisdiction that we cannot compel people to do. It's unfair. We have to stick to our own jurisdiction. I'm hoping that my colleagues will support A as moved, because I didn't move the motion, another did. That we acknowledge the receipt of the notice of intention. I would appreciate if you would pass that. I would hope that you would vote down B. There's a couple of reasons, and then vote down C, and I have amendments for those. My amendments would be deemed as contrary to the main motion, so we have to defeat B and C to introduce a new B and C. We already have in front of us a 160-page report, the vast majority of which is a very significant document prepared by professionals with expertise in this area. I don't see the need, and I've conferred with a number of people, for us to spend $35,000 to peer review something that's already been so professionally done. I believe their intent is very clear. Based on the map that you see on page 315 of the agenda, the map that they have provided clearly shows the buildings that they intend to come forward with heritage designation. That will have to go through the proper process, but that is obviously their intent. And the whole area in yellow in the map is intended to be demolished according to the provincial guidelines and under professional watch. So if we turn down B, because we don't need to spend that $35,000, then we would go to, let me get to my notes here. I would suggest that council has no interest in pursuing heritage designation of 107 Park Street North, with the exceptions of identified buildings 2, 2A, 8A, 24A, 21, 26, 28, and 30. These are the buildings that are clearly identified in the report that the property owner is willing to put designation on. And then if we defeat the current C, because it does also refer back to the peer review, we have to take that language out. So the new would be that council directs staff to consult with the Peterborough Architectural Conservation Authority Committee and report back to council on the appropriateness of designating buildings 2, 2A, 8A, 24A, 21, 26, 28, and 30 at 107 Park Street North under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act prior to November 7th, 2025, or such later date as mutually acceptable to the Commissioner of Infrastructure Planning and Growth Management and the property owner. So we will still proceed the proper way through PACAC let them do their homework, do their report, which will probably be very similar to what has already been prepared by the company, but we will let them do their job. So that would be my intention, sir. Mr. Chair, if we can move forward with that, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purnell. So it has been moved by Councillor Reel, and we will separate it out when we get there, A, B, and C. Speaking to the main motion, Councillor Chica.
I do thank staff for the way that the main motion was put forward in terms of the peer review. We wish we could have had a competitive process, because that is the process, that the sound process that is done in these circumstances. But because of the time, we can feasibly get one sole source procurement for our consultation. That is the whole point. If we were litigating something, there are two people, there's representatives from both sides that present their case. So that's the whole purpose, so that it's done in a fair and objective way. And we have the opportunity to select through procurement a sole source to be able to review that. Checks and balances are important for a site of such significance that we need to take our time and care looking at. We need that. And to not insist on that is not doing our due diligence. And I'll repeat that again. Due diligence is so important. We need to have that. And the listing, above all, the listing includes the whole site. So how it is listed includes all of the buildings. So PACAC has the right to look at the whole site that it listed in the first place. So that's another reason why the staff recommendation makes sense and it aligns with what the original listing was. So I just needed to make those comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Chica. Main motion, Councillor Hickey. Then Burke, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I too do support separating them out. A, yes, B, no, C, no, other than we can add in what Councillor Parnell's recommendations were. What I was intrigued by was bringing up the St. Catharines deal, but I look at it this way: with the building up or the building down, you're still dealing with contamination. I don't object to pursuing that and seeing if we can get it cleaned up. We've been told tonight by people smarter than me, which is pretty much everybody else that spoke, that we have no authority to compel them to clean it up. So I don't want to go down that road unless it's a lawsuit, but I'd rather wait and see what happens in St. Catharines before we do that, to be honest. I think everybody knows how I feel about designating, and I understand this was their report and they appear to be wanting to designate that. I will go with that tonight. I will go that they are looking at designating a certain portion of it. They're demolishing 80% of the build. It's 84,000 feet of 104,000 feet. That is substantial, no question. And I'll be honest, I grew up in Oshawa and we saw them tear down the north plant. And I think it was 1 million square feet in total, and it sat for about 40 years before they reconditioned it. And Mr. Potts knows what I'm talking about. They tore out a lot of stuff. It looked awful. It was ugly, but nobody wanted to clean it up. That's the problem. We debated this with OMC. We know that the province was involved with how we have to handle or mitigate that piece of property and manage that piece of property. And I do have faith that the demolition will be done to that same code. That's about it. I don't want to fight a losing battle, so I'd rather have some other municipality do it. Like I said, let have St. Catharines have a go at it. If they're successful, I would line up right behind it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hickey. Main motion, Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. I think to me, the thing that's frustrating. This is a historic decision, right? And I really appreciate staff acknowledging what is being asked of us in this way, where we're being given a very thorough report from a respected consultant that has a history and an interest in heritage-specific projects, and there is General Electric, or the people that are applying for the demolition, have shown that they acknowledge the history of the site and what it means to the city. Peterborough was built. She pretty much built Peterborough in a way, and I think that the people that are proposing the demolition are acknowledging what that site means to all of us, and so I think that's a good thing. And I appreciate that our staff are understanding the importance of this decision, whereby they're saying, well, this is coming from the applicant, so let's just see what a peer-reviewed take on the situation would give us back. And they're also asking us to direct this back to PACAC, which I think are good things. But the thing that's frustrating is that I see a great potential someday for my children or their children in what this site could mean differently for them. If all you have to do is go down to the Evergreen Brickworks or Liberty Village in Toronto to see how these sites can be turned into something that are economic drivers for the city and to the distillery district. And so to me, to sort of just try to fast track the demolition of a huge portion of that site isn't really for a forward thinking approach, Because what I believe we're doing, I believe we're doing, I'm not trying to speak for anyone else, is we're making it easier for General Electric to back away from having any liability with that site. We're making it easier for them to just have it sit like the parking lots have sat. Those huge parking lots, right? We're in a housing crisis. Elwood Jones showed us pictures where the administrative staff at General Electric had temporary housing on those sites. It's a beautiful thing to see. And so to me, I think that the staff recommendation will allow us to think about this in a very sober way and not make a hasty decision allowing them to demolish. We will look at it from multiple different angles because, like I said, my hope is that that site can someday be reimagined. And I would want the buildings to be part of that because I've seen that it's been done elsewhere. And I would be nervous to think about what would happen if we've already allowed them to take down one building on the Park Street side where there's a parking lot there right now, right? So this has been a very slow, not this term of council, previous. They took down one of the big buildings on the northeast side of the property. It's a parking lot now. So I worry that we're inching further and further towards this site being just a flattened foundation. And like I said, I see potential in what those buildings could mean. And, you know, if the municipality fights back with putting a little pressure on these types of asks, maybe what it will do is put General Electric in a position where they actually have to meaningfully remediate the land and consider alternatives to that land besides demolishing it, which at that point, it could be maybe a great partnership for the private sector to get involved. And so for these reasons, I'm not jumping the gun to try to force any of my ideas to happen at this point. I'm saying that I support the way these recommendations were put to us by staff, which is allowing us to have a longer view at it and to have a discussion at a later date based on further information. And I deeply support us supporting that and not making a hasty decision tonight that will be a lasting decision with lasting consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. Councillor Reel?
Through the chair, I don't know if Commissioner Nelson can answer this question. Is there any perspective, or in your talks with General Electric or whatever, was there any prospective buyers for the site?
Through the chair, that information was not supplied to the city. I'm not aware. And again, I think this is the current owner looking to basically mitigate. If they had potential buyers, I'm quite certain that they would explore those options, but staff were not made aware of any at this point that I'm aware of.
Is there any developer that has come forward that would maybe like to develop the property?
Through the chair to Councillor Riel, I think the same response in this. Staff are currently not aware of anything that the property owner has been approached by any developer.
To Mr. Commissioner Laidman, has the city done its due diligence for the use of this for affordable housing?
Through you, Chair Beamer, that hasn't been pursued. That's not part of this application.
Lastly, to Commissioner Freeman, what is the property tax implication for this demolition? Now have the corporation paying property tax on this property. So what is the implication when this is demolished for General Electric paying taxes?
Mr. Chairman, as council is well aware, the assessed values would be determined by MPAC, and based upon those assessed values, then the appropriate rate would be applied to the tax classification. So, in absolute dollars, Mr. Chairman, I would not be prepared to or could not answer that question tonight.
Through the chair, maybe you can get us the information on what the property taxes that General Electric is paying now for their property.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to look into that and circle back to council, perhaps with an email update.
To the chair, Mr. Freeman, we've had several properties that have or demolitions on properties. So maybe another unfair question. There is a building, the corporation is paying taxes, they demolish the building. What would be the percentage of the tax decrease to the city as opposed to paying full taxes? Ballpark?
Just a question of clarification, Councillor. Are you referring to like a vacancy rebate? If you are, the city ceased its vacancy rebate program quite some time ago. I believe back in about, I was going to say 2017, but I could be incorrect on that. There is no vacancy rebate program.
No, what I'm talking about is OMC was paying taxes on a piece of property. So they left the property and now it's demolished. I know that we own it, but maybe that's a poor example. So their taxes would be diminished by a certain percentage from full taxes to one that's a vacant lot.
Yeah, again, Mr. Chairman, that is the purview of MPAC, and they would have to do their assessment on what is remaining on that property.
All right, thank you, Councillor Riel. Councillor Baldwin and DeGay. Councillor Baldwin.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my understanding is right now, General Electric isn't doing anything with the property, regardless. And you know, I really kind of like what Councillor Hakey said a little while ago. Sometimes it's best not to be first, because rest assured, if we're going to sue General Electric to get them to clean up what's there will be a significant cost to the taxpayers one way or the other. So to say there's no cost, it's ridiculous. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson, we heard when we were talking about the amendment about concerns about abatement and getting rid of the buildings. I know building number 10 that's been referenced tonight, that's the big building on the corner at Park Street, was taken down and it turned into a parking lot where the substructure was not interrupted, if you will. Were there any concerns about that process of taking that building down to the neighbors or to the city? Are you aware of any concerns that we had, any fallout from that?
Through the chair to Councillor Baldwin, I am currently not aware of any concerns or fallout that resulted from that demolition. I think that may have actually preceded my time here at the city, but yeah, at this point, I'm not aware of any concerns. Sorry.
No, thanks for that. And I'm not either. I've been here for 70 years. The question I have, Mr. Nelson, is in item B, section B there, we're talking about, and thank you for the report. I really agree with a lot of what's in the report. It's well done. I'm wondering, as a contribution, perhaps from General Electric, if we could somehow let them know we're going to ask for a procurement and get an architect to have a look at this. And we've got a bill here of an upset of $35,000, including tax. Would we be able to ask General Electric to pay that amount as a contribution?
Through the chair, we can ask, but I'm not so certain that they'd be obligated to comply.
So I appreciate the answer, Mr. Chair. I'm suggesting that, you know, General Electric has come to us and they're wanting an opportunity to get a demolition permit. And I suspect, given what Councillor Riel's just said about them paying less tax when the buildings are down, I think it's reasonable for us to ask if they want the buildings down, if they could contribute to this peer review at a cost of $35,000, including tax. So I don't know how we do that, but I think it's reasonable to ask them to pay that amount. It'd be chicken feed to them. but it's a cost of $35,000 for the taxpayer. Mr. Chair, the other thing that I understand from reading the report and talking briefly this afternoon with the chief building inspector, who's on kind of sabbatical but back, if you will, that there are some significant structural concerns with some of the building, i.e. roofs and the smokestack. And so I think it's reasonable that those buildings that are structurally compromised do need to come down, in my humble opinion. And I'm not certainly not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but if you've got a property that's deficient, even if it's your own home, you need to fix it. And so I suspect that General Electric, sure, they're going to pay less tax, I get that, but there are some safety concerns with the building, and can it be resurrected to do something else? So I agree with the recommendations from the report and certainly would support them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Baldwin. I have Councillor Duguay, Mayor Leal, Councillor Purnell, second time. Councillor Duguay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When considering our official plan, I think this is relevant. Section 719 speaks to brownfield site development. This is important. Our own official plan provides directions to us. There's 3 subsections, and it speaks to the development or redevelopment of potentially contaminated sites shall be assessed and remediated in a manner consistent with the Environmental Protection Act. Proposed development on any known or suspected contaminated site shall be subject to certain studies, and then where the need for remediation is confirmed. What I'm getting at, Mr. Chairman, our own official plan provides a definition of brownfield site, and our own official plan says when there's development or redevelopment, which is not happening here, then all of these studies will automatically happen. As Commissioner Potts has told us, when a demolition permit is applied for, it will be subject to its own regulatory due diligence to ensure that all applicable laws met. And if we were to say tonight that we don't support the demolition permit, well, we know where that's going to end up. I do support Councillor Parnell's approach. The necessity for a peer review of a very comprehensive heritage impact assessment, and I'm certainly conversant with those because I've seen many in my professional capacity. And this would be one that I would consider to be far more comprehensive than typical and many. And as we've heard earlier, it clearly states that there's a willingness of the property owner to preserve important buildings. So I do support Councillor Parnell's recommendation. I do not see the necessity of expending $35,000 to have a peer review of a heritage impact assessment will arrive. I can almost assure you the exact same conclusion. And lastly, Councillor Parnell's motion would do this for PACAC. We'd say this is our direction. We're recommending these buildings, the anchored buildings on the east and west side portions of the building, be considered for designation, following the listing potential, asking for PACAC to comment on same. So they're not being overlooked. We're providing them our direction as the decision makers. So I would certainly support Councillor Parnell's recommended motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duguay. Mayor Leal.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I do commend staff. It is a comprehensive report. But what intrigues me is that the company that was hired by GE, Veranova, to do the architectural heritage review, ERA, clearly identified the buildings that have unique heritage attributes. The late Victorian and Edwardian era, World War I and the interwar period, and the post-war modern period, and they clearly identified those buildings being 8A, 24A, 26, 21, 24A, 28, and 30. Those that are really familiar with the GE site will know that some of those buildings have those unique gargoyles on them, representing the era when those buildings were built and should be preserved. The other thing, if I was a resident on Wolf Street, I'd want that chimney at that power plant taken down tomorrow, because it was my understanding that significant number of bricks have started to fall off that. It's a real hazard, and of course, with winds, etc., that we've been getting over the last little while, I'd want to get that demolished as quickly as possible. With regards to the property tax situation, it is my understanding in the province of Ontario that assessment changes automatically when an entity goes from manufacturing. GE ceased manufacturing there in 2018. It automatically goes back to a residential rate. And that's my understanding how MPAC functions. So it doesn't matter whether those buildings are standing or demolished. It's already gone back, in my view, to that residential rate, and that certainly can be confirmed, Mr. Friedman, in the weeks to come. But that's been the standard. And to make a direct comparison with St. Catharines, it's also very interesting because those members of council that went to see their new convention, entertainment, and sportsplex on Ontario Street would have had the opportunity to see this site, which is also on the main street at St. Catharines. And I just happened to be in St. Catharines last Saturday for a funeral. And St. Catharines will handle this whole issue very gingerly because General Motors still has an operation in St. Catharines at 270 Glendale Avenue, where they employ between 600 and 1,000 people. So there will be represented by Unifor Local 199. So there will be some interesting dynamics in the St. Catharines area. I think the staff report is pretty straightforward. I think we're at a point in time, and I share with Councillor Burke, but one should look at the history of the distillery district in Toronto. It was a contaminated area, perhaps even far beyond the situation with GE here in Peterborough. But it took a long period of time and a lot of very ambitious entrepreneurs before that got developed where it is today. Thanks very much, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lowe, for that. I have Councillor Purnell a second time, Burke a second time, Duguay a second time. Councillor Burke, or Councillor Purnell, second.
I'd call the question, please, or put the question.
Okay, moved by Councillor Purnell, put the question. And that is carried. All right, so we have been asked to separate out A, B, and C, and they're just the A, B, and C on page 155, the main motion. So moved by Councillor Reel. Take a vote on A. And that is carried. Moved by Councillor Reel. B, and just for clarification, we're voting on B as C as written in your reports. There's no amended. If it loses, then we'll look at an amendment, but it's as written right in front of you on your report. So moved by Councillor Reel. B as written. And that is lost. And moved by Councillor Reel. C. And that is lost. All right, Councillor Purnell, you want to make an amended B and amended C?
Yes, and I think I'll still keep them separated for you. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So since the motion, the original B, has not passed, I do have the amended version of it, which I have shared with both clerks and the chair. And that the new B is that council has no interest in pursuing heritage designation of 107 Park Street North, with the exceptions of the identified buildings 2, 2A, 8A, 24A, 21, 26, 28, and 30.
Okay, so we'll get that up on the screen if we can. So speakers to that B now. Councillor Chica speaking to amended B.
Thank you, through you, Chair Beamer. I have a question for Director Appleby. The listing of 107 Park Street East is a whole, and when that was listed in 2023, it was the whole. So, in your opinion, is it not necessary for the whole to come back to PACAC? There's an argument to be made that PACAC has the right under Part 4 of the Heritage Act to make their comment because it's being referred back to them. They have that right before the demolition permit is brought forward to make their statement on the original listing. There is not an amended listing. If there's an amendment to the listing, that should be part of PACAC's purview based on Section 4 of the Heritage Act. Can you speak to that, please, Director Appleby?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So I think, my response is that it's council's responsibility to consult with PACAC when council wishes to consider designation of a listed property. And so council needs to decide what it wants to consult with PACAC on. So council could choose to consult on the entirety of the property, or council could choose to scope what it is they wish to consult with PACAC on.
And is there any, thank you through you, Chair, if I may, is there, do we have access to anyone for next week that could speak to this from a heritage standpoint, that is a heritage expert? Can we have that arranged for next week, please? Thank you.
Through the chair, as a starting point, Mr. Hamilton from the Heritage Committee had provided some commentary today. I'm sure that he would be more than willing to speak, but if council is looking for, someone else in that field, we could try and make those phone calls and see if we can have someone participate, but it might be a little tricky to get someone on that short notice.
Thank you, if I may, through you, Chair. This is to Cecilia Reyna. In the absence of a Director of Heritage, would staff, or under your designation as CEO of our corporation, would you be able to arrange that for next week? In the absence of, and we've had in the absence of a director, someone speak to the Peak Committee in the past, so I'm wondering if that could be arranged. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will look into it, because whether it is what, as per the CO bylaw, what powers, I have to look into.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sia Rena. Thank you very much, Councillor Chica. Councillor Burke to B.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that I feel sad for our community and for the history of that site, that we're considering the demolition of those buildings in such a sort of, to me, frivolous way. And those are my comments. We're not even willing to look with our own heritage committee at the whole of the site. I think that's wild to me. And, all you got to do is go to the site on Townsend up the street from the factory where they had the lab, which is a whole city block where the GE lab used to be, to see what the future of these buildings that are going to be demolished are going to be. There might be a placard, there might be some trees that may or may not survive on the site, but at the end of the day, I think this is, I just don't understand why we're making this decision and why we're not deferring this as a whole in the way that our staff recommended and in a way that activates the subject matter experts that we have at our disposal. I urge everyone to check out the site of the old GE lab. It's been for sale for decades. It's a gravel lot, and it's adjacent to a big Bethune project upgrade that we've done, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And to me, this is just a really sad way to look at this site when this site could offer so many potentials to the future of this community for housing, for meaningful remediation, for meaningful activity that activates the neighborhoods around the site. I feel like, what are we doing? It's crazy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burke. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Hill?
Through the chair, it's sad that week after week we come here and every time there's a heritage issue or we're talking about PACAC, you undermine them. If I was on PACAC, I'd resign right today. Say, you don't want a heritage committee. They play a role. And every time I sit here and I watch this, every time a heritage building comes up, we undermine them. So if I was sitting on PACAC, I'd say, stuff you. I have no intentions of being on your committee because you undermine me every week. Sorry. Why do you have a heritage committee or heritage? And if you don't want to protect heritage, then let's do away with it because I would be resigning effective today.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Parnell, second time.
Thank you. Just for clarification, I think I should maybe add a little bit of detail to that because I have said identified buildings 2, 2A, 8A, etc. But perhaps we should say identified buildings highlighted in green and blue on page or Appendix B, just for full clarity in case I'm a little bit concerned about the 2D there.
Okay, so can we reference the color then in the motion? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah,
and it's blue?
To identified buildings highlighted in green and blue on Appendix B, just to cover everything.
Green and blue in Appendix B.
Thank you.
So we'll add that in since you're the mover, green and blue in Appendix B. Speaking to the B, Councillor Baldwin.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of the opinion that PACAC really should look at the entire site. The report has identified, the General Electric folks have identified those buildings that they believe have heritage value. But I believe if PACAC were to look at the entire site, there might be one or two others that they believe should be preserved. So I'm not opposed to demolition of several of the buildings, but I really think that our committee should have a look themselves just to satisfy that they've had the opportunity to look at their expertise with their skill set against the criteria from which they make decisions and then bring those recommendations. It may very well be that they're the only properties that they would recommend are those that are suggested by Councillor Parnell, respectfully, but there may be a couple more. So in terms of that, I wouldn't support just having those 7 looked at. Now I'd like to see the entire site. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parnell. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Parnell. We'll take a vote on B. And it's up there for you to read if you need be. We've already started voting, Councillor Burke. And that is carried. All right, Councillor Purnell, C.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go back to my. All right, so the new C, and I'm going to add the same highlighted in blue and green on Appendix B to this, just for clarity. So that council directs staff to consult with the Peterborough Architectural Conservation Authority Committee and report back to council on the appropriateness of designating buildings highlighted in green and blue on Appendix B, including 2, 2A, 8A, 24A, 21, 26, 28, and 30 at 107 Park Street North under Part 6 of the Ontario Heritage Act prior to November 7th, 2025, or such later date as mutually acceptable to the Commissioner of Infrastructure Planning and Growth Management and the property owner. So really all we're doing in this motion, Mr. Chair, is to make sure that everything that's in blue and green that has been highlighted as having heritage value will be reviewed by our very important Heritage Committee and reaffirmed that, yes, we should, in fact, designate them. And we're following all the rules. Thank you.
All right, moved by Councillor Purnell. C, comments or questions? Councillor Baldwin Burke. Councillor Baldwin, and then Burke.
Mr. Chair, not to beat a dead horse here, but in the course of PACAC doing their investigation, looking at those 7 properties, and then perhaps having another hour to do their due diligence, would they ever come back and say, you know, you missed a couple? Is that possible? I'd like to ask Mr. Appleby if that's ever happened in the past, where they've been asked to look at specific buildings, let's say, or a specific property, and then in the course of their investigations, they've come across some new information that they should bring to council.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of a scenario where they've maybe added in, additional buildings or additional elements into their review, particularly if what they're being asked to review is scoped quite limitedly.
I predicted that, but I thought I had to ask it. Thanks a lot, Mr. Appleby.
Councillor Baldwin, thank you. Councillor Burke, C.
Yeah, I think I'll support C because it's all that we're left with. You know, like Councillor Riel likes to say, whatever, like can't saw the sawdust or whatever he says, but I feel that saying applies to this. But I just like to point for the record, I had a question of clarification that I didn't get off, and I incorrectly voted on the B. If it's okay to change my vote, I'd like to do so. If I can't, I will change it next week. But I'm just disappointed that it's come to this. Like, what is the need for us? What is the need for us with the history of this site for the 11 of us to filter it down to this limited scope? I mean, we have a committee, an architectural advisory committee, that are people that actually hold knowledge to anything that we're missing about historical architectural significance of the buildings that are being proposed to demolish. And again, we're now left with a very limited scope to work with. We're basically just accepting what has been proposed to us by the applicant, and it's not. I don't agree with it, but I would like the opportunity for PACAC to at least look at the buildings in green and blue. I don't know why they're going to look at them. GE is already saying that they're historically significant and that they're willing to mothball them and save them. So, I mean, if you want to talk about a waste of time, I think that this is just a performative motion because the consultant's report is already saying what we would ask PACAC to do. So again, I'm confused. I'm frustrated. I think this is the wrong way to look at this very important site in our city. I think it deserves more from us as leaders around the table to look at it in an actual meaningful way, especially when we do have resources like PACAC to help us do that. And I think, I don't know, I guess it doesn't matter where I vote on this. It is what it is.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Chika and Hickey. Councillor Chika.
My question through you, Chair, is why would we not, and this is a rhetorical question, why would we not empower our public committee of experts who dedicate themselves monthly and beyond that for hours and hours beyond their monthly meetings with the expertise that sits on the committee, our staff, to make decisions for the better interests of the public of our city of Peterborough. I don't know why. This is
Point
not
of
a
order.
cost to us. No, I'm speaking to the motion. There's nothing I'm asking.
Councillor
Why
has a
do we
point
not
of order.
empower the
Councillor
committee?
Cornell, what's your point of order?
Thank you, sir. I believe this
Your
question has
procedural
already
point of
been
order.
voted on with B, that we are only looking at certain properties in green and blue, not the whole property. The change in the C is really only to remove.
This is not a point of order.
To the study, the peer review. So we've already made this decision, and we are relitigating or debate. Thank you.
So Councillor Chikansi.
Well, C leaves us with as we said to my left, the dust. So it's just a shame that we're looking at the dust and that's what we leave to our committee. It's a shame. It's a shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chika. Councillor Akey.
Just quickly, Mr. Chair, and let's talk about the blue area specifically. The rules around environmental cleanup are there's two sets. One is for residential, one is for commercial, and they are vastly different. I don't see this site ever being used for residential at all. Even after the contamination is it has been cleaned up, the record of site condition has been met. I've spoken with developers that say that stuff will leach for years. You stand on the grass long enough and bare feet, it'll come right up. And you can't get away from it. So that's why they're mostly commercial sites again, like in Oshawa. And I use Oshawa as an example. On Ritson Road, it's all mall because it's a lot different. That's just something that I wasn't sure if everybody was aware of, but there are two standards. There's not just one standard for cleaning.
Thank you very much, Councillor Akey. Any further comments or questions? Moved by Councillor Parnell. C, we'll take a vote. And that is carried. All right, 13E, our last item, municipal addressing bylaw. Councillor Burke.
Wow, thank you, Chair Beamer. Let me just get up my report.
Take your time.
Thank you. So this is a question through the chair to Mr. Nelson. So am I understanding this correctly? And I'm not being critical. This is an honest question. It's not a leading question, but I understand in the report the need to update the addressing. And the analogy I'll use is that if historically, let's say there was a house that was number 500 and then it jumped to like number 520 or something, when that was not the way that things should be plotted out, are we giving staff the authority through this bylaw to actually physically change someone's address, whether that's a business or a residence?
Through the chair, my understanding is that staff would be looking at it from a perspective of, yes, looking at those anomalies, because I think there is, through the CRTC, there's requirements that through NG 911, we have a responsibility as a municipality to meet those standardized requirements for civic addressing.
Correct. And I think the thing that that's the way I understand it too. But the point that I'm trying to get at is that we as councillors are on the ground level with our community, and I'm just trying to imagine a scenario where a business gets told that, for 30 years they've been, 500 George Street. Now they're told, well, you're 512 George Street. There's implications to that, economic implications. You have to change your advertising, your business cards, your letterhead, things like that. Are we just supposed to direct back the constituents to this legislation?
Through the chair to Councillor Burke, Unfortunately, yeah, this is legislation that's outside of the municipality's hands. So it's legislation that we are being told we have to deal with. But unfortunately, it's also legislation that we are enacted with implementing. So from that perspective, unfortunately, if there's a circumstance of that nature, I think that, obviously staff will be appreciative of that understanding and possibly look at, is there an adjustment timeline? But from that perspective, we also have the requirements to meet those requirements so that, when that 911, because the municipality will be taking on certain legislative requirements and obligations as well. And if there is something that would dictate that emergency services were unable to respond in a timely manner because of a mishap, I would anticipate that responsibility will fall on the municipality.
I agree, and I think the thing that I'm trying to implore to staff in these circumstances, which can be, people are possessive of where they live, and I would just hope that if this was done in a way that was like a big upheaval to a business or something, that the proper information could be given to the residents so that they understand it, and they're not having to come to me to understand it, because I'm just doing my best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Brooke. Are you comfortable moving this? You don't have to. So we'll get someone else to move it. You sure? I didn't put. All right. Okay, Councilor Burke's good. Councilor Burke moves it. Councilor Akey.
Thank you very much. So people know I can give you some great examples of exactly what we're correcting. I have property on George Street where the people have legally divided the property, and we make up an address, 361A and 361B, because there is not a change of address, because it's a pain in the ass. That's why they don't do it. And there's a lot of them around. So good luck. But I can't speak residentially, but we run into it all the time on the commercial stuff.
Thank you, Councilor Akey. Further comments or questions? Moved by Councilor Burke. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. All right, we have one notice of motion. Councilor Hakey, should be a short and a quick one. Councilor Hakey, notice of motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Whereas the corporation of the city of Peterborough has eligible costs directly linked to the March 2025 ice storm, the council of the corporation of city of Peterborough hereby requests assistance under the municipal ice storm assistance program. Excuse me. Further, that Richard Freeman, Commissioner of Finance and Corporate Support Services / Treasurer, is given delegated authority to verify and attest to the accuracy of the Municipal Ice Storm Assistance Program application package. And Mr. Freeman may have something else to add. I'm not sure.
Thank you very much for that, Councilor Hakey. Commissioner Freeman, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments. First of all, a fulsome report is being prepared that would provide details on the city's response to the ice storm. So rest assured that is in the works. We're hoping to do that, certainly by the end of the year, hopefully in the November cycle, but definitely before the end of the year. We believe that the costs incurred to date are approximately about $11 million. And so our response, first of all, the impact of the ice storm was substantial, and our response was substantial. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to apply, through the municipal ice storm assistance funding that the province is providing. The requirement for council resolution is required as part of the application. That application is in the works right now. We have to submit the official deadline is, the end of October. We're hoping by the week of October 20th, we're kind of finalizing that. But in any event, by the end of October. Now, here's the key question. Is it all going to be eligible for funding? And unfortunately, I don't think it's all going to be. So the issue will be, and we'll speak to it more in the report, but right now, and the reason why is that of course And the reason why it's taking this long to kind of digest all the information is that the criteria that the province uses, for instance, let me give you an example. We have to look at every piece of equipment we used in our response. And the rules of the application will determine how much we're able to recover for that piece of equipment. The rate that the province allows to recover may be different than the rate we charge to operate that piece of equipment. So all that analysis has to be done. Here's the key thing. As of right now, I'm thinking that the application, the claim, is probably in the order of magnitude of around $8 million. So I've got my homework here to sort out how to fund the delta. Of course, I will come to council with my recommendations by the end of the year. But anyway, just to give you a snapshot of kind of where we're at with the cost, with our response, and the claim, and that we will be submitting. Obviously, we are intending to apply for every eligible penny that we can, and we will bring that forward. Obviously, we'll submit it to the province, and then I'll bring that information forward to you. So anyway, thank you, Councillor, for your support and bringing that forward here tonight, and we'll take Council's motion and include that in our package. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to just share a bit more.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner, for all your hard work, and staff. Speakers to the notice of motion, Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Chair Beamer. Definitely support any action we can take to try to get reimbursed for that. I guess my question would be to Mr. Freeman, please, is what has changed? Because when we were living through the ice storm as councillors without power, meeting with in the emergency response team, and then also in the subsequent weeks and months of what that tree removal looked like, dealing with constituents, I think the messaging I got as a councillor was that, no, don't worry, we're going to be covered on this. And now it seems to be like that is not the case.
Mr. Chairman, in the early days of the response, of course, the concern was under the rules of the program, and keep in mind that this program or this funding opportunity is different than the initial disaster assistance program that was in place at the time of the ice storm. So the province has brought this forward subsequent to the ice storm event and said, municipalities, you can use the new criteria now to apply. So initially we were concerned that we may or may not meet the thresholds that were in place. We far exceeded that, as it turns out. But then it's now working through all the criteria. So it's, as information is becoming available, as we're dissecting the response and how the claim and the costs we incurred align. So it's just really working through the details, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks. And through the chair, I guess my question for clarification would be, when you say that we have a $3 million or $4 million shortfall of what could be covered in this application, and when you say, you have to get creative to make up the difference, does that mean creative within our city budget to find that money, or creative within other insurance related claims? Like, is that I guess I'm just looking for some reassurance that the rest of the money, the millions of dollars, is going to be covered through other eligible programs outside of our budget.
Mr. Chairman, I would love to give the councillor hope, but I'm just going to paint a very real picture here, and I'll bring forward all of the available funding sources for council's review and purview, but I will commit to doing that within the existing budget that council has already approved. So that's what I'm going to take on as a task to try and bring forward to council. My recommendations with how we're going to fund it, and I might need to look at all, because hopefully, councillor, there's areas in the budget that perhaps we didn't incur all the anticipated costs because of the ice storm, and maybe I can use some of the surpluses, residual surpluses, to help fund the overages in other areas. So that's an example of all the analysis and rigor that I need to do.
Finally, this is the clarification, though, is that this is when we've heard during the time that the province was going to cover all the costs, this is the only door that we have to get reimbursed for that from the province. There's no other sources of relief from the province. The rest is going to be left to us.
Mr. Chairman, I'm opening all the doors and seeing what response we're getting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Burke, Councillor Crowley, Mayor Leal, Councillor DeGay. Councillor Crowley?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Commissioner Freeman, is there any federal disaster relief that we could be eligible for, or do you need to declare a state of emergency or a disaster area or something like that to qualify for that?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that there is a federal program, but I don't believe we would meet the criteria. So again, there's other thresholds in place.
I see.
Again, those are the opportunities we're going to look at, but
sure.
Just as I'm saying it out loud, I don't think we will meet that next threshold.
Fair. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Crowley. Mayor Leal?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The senior leadership team here are being very humble this evening in the response on this one, because I know that as we move through the various stages of the ice storm, our staff were making suggestions to the Provincial Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and indeed to Minister Flack, that clearly identified sort of the shortfalls and idiosyncrasies of the current provincial support in place. So as we worked through that, we were able to point out these areas that perhaps should be considered when not only our community but other communities are making submissions when they deal with floods, forest fires, and ice storms. So I just want to say for the public record, this group right in front of me today are very humble, and I believe their humility through this will pay some dividends down the road, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor Leal. Councillor DeGay?
Thank you, Chair Beamer. I'm cognizant of the hour, but to Mr. Freeman and his considerable door opening exercise, a door that remains open to us is a delegation to Queen's Park. Minister Dunlop was here, attended our community. Mr. Dunlop also spoke at AMO. And if there, I do recall, colleagues, that I don't think we qualified for the Derico storm event. We were just slightly less than the threshold. But I believe a door that might be still open to us as elected officials is to go to Queen's Park, if necessary. And if there is a significant shortfall, that remains an option that we may have to pursue arising from this report. Just food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor DeGay. Any further comments or questions on the notice of motion? Moved by Councillor Hickey. We'll take a vote. And that is carried. Other business. Mayor Leal, other business?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I provided a copy to all colleagues this morning. I have joined, after canvassing my fellow mayors across the province of Ontario, to join with them. I wrote a letter to the Premier with regards of the use of automated speed enforcement equipment, specifically in school zones. We're suggesting that with the legislation, we're anticipating legislation when the House comes back on October the 20th, that when the government presents this bill, that an exception will be made for automated speed enforcement in school zones. But it's interesting enough, over the weekend, I was doing a bit of digging, and sources that cannot be identified in the city of Toronto indicated that the practice of drivers are not ticketed below 11 kilometers per hour over the 30, 40, and 50 kilometers per hour zones, with a slightly larger buffer at 60 kilometers per hour and above. I think that addresses this whole notion about a tax grab, that no tickets have been issued from 1 to 10 kilometers over the 30 kilometer hour threshold. My colleague, Newmarket Mayor John Taylor, well, he wouldn't give a specific number, about the buffer zone. He did indicate that in Newmarket, 1 up to 10 kilometers an hour have never been issued a ticket in Newmarket. And the communities in Durham region, Niagara, York, Guelph, Kingston, London, Greater Sudbury, Belleville, Oakville, Halton Hills use the same, because they use the same building equipment as the City of Toronto, their automated cameras are calibrated the same way. And my good friend, Mayor Patrick Brown from the great city of Brampton, had a special resolution passed their council, and I'll just highlight a few of the elements in there. They talk about limit the use of ASA cameras to school locations, maintain the existing threshold, and implement variable threshold speeds, maintain existing speed threshold during peak hours during school times, implement a higher speed threshold for non-peak hours to enforce excessive speeding and stunt driving. Prohibit the operation of ASC cameras for 6 months following a speed limit change. Require that surplus ASC revenues be reinvestment in road safety related infrastructure, initiatives, and education. Require that staff report annually to council through the budget process on the allocation and use of surplus ASC revenues. Require staff report annually to council on the outcomes of the ASC program. Example, number of tickets, speed reduction, speed limit, compliance, collisions, injury, fatalities, etc. So I think we're in good company as we articulated that letter, the Premier, that was sent collectively on our behalf today.
Thank you very much for that, Mayor Leal. Any other business, colleagues? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Hakey, we'll take a vote. That is carried. We're in adjournment. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, staff. Thank you, community. Have a great week.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.